welcome to Potter Red. Today's adventure, Harry's Accidental Magic at Age 4 Unsealed, the Lost Library of the First Wizards. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1, The Wall That Remembered a Door. The cupboard under the stairs had a smell all its own, and Harry knew it, as he knew the shape of his own hands in the dark, dust and old shoe polish. The dry breath of the wood. Somewhere behind the plaster, the small secret ticking that pipes make when the water has run and stopped. He was 4 years old, and this narrow slot beneath the staircase was the largest thing he was certain belonged to him, if only because no one else ever wanted to be in it. It was a Tuesday, though Harry did not know the word for Tuesday. He knew it was the day after the day Dudley had a birthday, because there had been cake and he had not had any, and the not having still sat in him like a stone swallowed whole. He had been sent to the cupboard in the middle of the afternoon for a crime he could not reconstruct. Something about a cup. Something about the way Aunt Petunia's mouth went thin and white at the edges when she looked at him. The look you give a stain you cannot scrub out no matter how hard she tried. He had cried a little at first, quietly, because loud crying brought Uncle Vernon, and Uncle Vernon's hand was very large. Then he had stopped because there was no one to cry to, and the crying only made his nose ache. He lay on the thin mattress with his knees pulled up and stared at the underside of the stairs, at the diagonal beams that marched up and away over his head like the ribs of some enormous sleeping animal. And he was so tired of being small in a house that had decided he did not matter. That was when the warm feeling started. It began in his chest, near the place he thought of as the middle of himself, and it was not like being hot. It was more like the moment when you have been cold for a long time and someone finally wraps a blanket around you. That spreading, that loosening. Harry had felt it before. It had happened the day his hair grew back overnight after Aunt Petunia cut it all off, and the day the ugly brown jumper had shrunk and shrunk in her hands until it would have fit a doll. Strange things. Things he was punished for, though he never chose them, never even knew how to want them until they had already happened. This time the warm feeling did not stop where it usually stopped. It kept going. It ran down his arms to his fingers and up his throat and pulled behind his eyes, and it wanted something, the way a full cup wants to spill. Harry pressed his hands flat against the wall at the back of the cupboard, as he sometimes did when Dudley's feet came pounding down the stairs above him, and the whole world shook with the weight of that other, larger boy. He pressed his hands there and he thought, without words, in the wide, wordless way that small children think, I wish there was somewhere else, anywhere that isn't here. The wall went soft under his palms. Not soft like a pillow, soft like the surface of milk when a skin has formed on top and you touch it with a spoon and it gives, just for a moment, before it decides what to do. Harry snatched his hands back. The wall looked exactly as it always had, gray and scuffed, with a pencil mark near the bottom where he had once tried to draw a window because he wanted one so badly. He waited. His own breathing was the loudest thing in the cupboard, and even that seemed to have gone careful, the way it went careful when Uncle Vernon's step paused outside the little door. Then, very faintly, from somewhere that seemed to be both behind the wall and behind his own ears, he heard a sound. It was a note. A single, low, patient note, the kind a very big bell makes a long time after it has been struck, when the ringing has almost died and only the memory of the ringing is left. It went on longer than a sound should. It went on so long that Harry felt it in his teeth and in the soles of his bare feet, and he understood with the same certainty that tells a child fire is hot without needing to be told twice that the sound was old, older than the house, older than the stairs, older than anything he had a shape for in his head. It was the kind of sound a mountain might make if a mountain could hum to itself in its sleep, and it did not frighten him, though by rights it should have. It felt instead like something very large had noticed him, and had decided that noticing him was a good thing. He put his hands back on the wall. This time the plaster did not merely soften, it drew back from his fingers like frost retreating from a warm breath on a window pane, and beneath it, where there should have been brick and pipe and the dull machinery of an ordinary house, there was a line, a straight, clean line of pale gold light, running from the floor of the cupboard up into the dark under the stairs, like someone on the other side had opened a door. The barest crack in the light of another afternoon was leaking through. The line trembled. It seemed almost shy, and then it steadied and grew, the smallest degree, and Harry understood that it was waiting to see what he would do. Harry, being 4, did the thing that 4-year-olds do. He put his eye to the crack. He could not have said afterward what he saw in that first look, because it was too much and his eyes were too small. There was gold. There was a great sweep of gold going up and up. There was the sense of a room so large that the far end of it was lost in a soft brightness, the way the end of a beach is lost in shimmer on a hot day. There were tall shapes standing in rows that went back and back beyond counting, and a high, pale glow gathered near a ceiling he could not find, and everywhere, on everything. That gold, moving very slightly, the way sunlight moves in the bottom of a swimming pool. And there was the smell. The smell came through the crack and wrapped around him, and Harry breathed it in, and something in his chest ached with how good it was. It was the smell of old paper, though he had no word for that either. It was dry and sweet and a little like honey and a little like the inside of the church they had gone to once for someone's wedding, and under all of it was a green smell, a growing smell, Like somewhere in that vast gold room a garden had been left to itself for 1,000 years and had learned to like the dark. It was the opposite of the cupboard. It was the opposite of everything. He breathed it in until his small chest could hold no more, and then he breathed it in again. The crack widened. It did not creak. It did not grind. It simply became larger, the way a pupil grows in a dimming room, until it was the size of a proper doorway. And the light spilled out over Harry and turned his gray pajamas to gold, and lit the dust in the air so that each speck hung and turned like a tiny burning world. He watched the dust turn. He had spent hours of his life watching dust in the one thin bar of light that came under the cupboard door, and he had never seen it do anything but drift, gray and tired. This dust danced. Behind him, muffled and enormous, Aunt Petunia's voice came down through the floorboards. "And you can stay in there till you learn some manners." Harry looked back over his shoulder at the ordinary dark, at the little door with its little latch that only opened from the outside, at the whole of the narrow, mean life he had been given. Then he looked forward, into the gold. And because he was 4, and because no one had ever taught him that a boy should be afraid of impossible doors, he crawled through. The floor on the other side was warm. That was the first thing, and it undid him a little because Harry had spent so much of his short life being cold that warmth, without a price, felt like a trick. He crouched on the threshold with his fingers spread against the stone and waited for the trick to arrive. The stone was pale, almost the color of the inside of a shell, and it was smooth in the way of things that have been walked on by a great many feet over a great many years, worn into gentle hollows, but there was no dust on it. In a room that smelled as old as this one, there should have been dust, mountains of it, and there was none, and Harry noticed that the way children notice the small wrongnesses that adults have trained themselves to ignore. He rubbed his palm over the stone to be sure. It came away clean. In the cupboard, everything he touched came away gray. He looked up. The hall went on forever. That was how it seemed to him, and it was not far from the truth. Shelves rose on either side of him, higher than the house, higher than the church, higher than anything, and they were full of books. Not books like the 2 picture books Dudley had torn the covers off. These books were of every size, some as small as a matchbox and some as large as a door, bound in leather gone the color of old wine, in cloth, in things that gleamed like beetle shells and things that looked soft as moss. They marched up into a dimness far above where the light gathered itself into a kind of high, patient glow, and if Harry squinted he could see, very far up, that they were ladders leaning against the shelves, and walkways of dark wood crossing from one side of the hall to the other, and here and there a lamp that burned without any flame he could see, giving off that gold that had come to fetch him through the wall. There was no one in the hall, and yet it did not feel empty. It felt the way a room feels when someone has just stepped out of it, when the chair is still warm and the book is still open and you know, without being told, that they will be back, and that they know you are there. Harry stood very still, as he stood when he was trying to tell whether the house was safe or whether Uncle Vernon was in one of his moods, and he listened, and the hall listened back. Harry stood up. His legs were unsteady, partly because he was small and the ceiling was so far away that looking at it made him sway, and partly because a feeling was rising in him that he had no name for and would not have a name for until he was much older. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of something enormous and being, for once, welcome there. He took a step. The stone was warm under his bare foot. He took another. His footsteps made almost no sound, but the sound they did make seemed to travel a long way, up and up between the shelves, and something up there, high in the gold, seemed to turn its attention toward the warm noise of a child walking, where no child had walked in a very long time. "Hello," Harry said, because Aunt Petunia said you should say hello when you came into someone's house, and even Harry, who had been given very few manners and beaten for the lack of the rest, understood that this was someone's house. The word went up into the shelves and did not come back. But it did not fall flat either. The way his voice fell flat in the cupboard, it seemed to be carried somewhere, gently, the way a leaf is carried on slow water, up and away and in. He walked. There was nothing else to do, and everything in him wanted to. The shelves slid by on either side, and the books watched him, or seemed to, and once or twice he was almost certain that one of them leaned very slightly forward as he passed, the way a dog leans toward the door when it hears a car it recognizes. He did not try to touch them. Something told him not to. Some old careful instinct born of a house where touching the wrong thing brought the large hand down. But he looked and looked, turning in slow circles as he walked, his neck cricked back, his mouth a little open, and the gold light moved over his upturned face and found, under the dirt and the tear tracks and the faint yellow ghost of an old bruise, the plain astonishment of a very young person meeting wonder for the first time, and finding it kind. Some of the books had pictures on their spines that moved. On one, a small painted ship rocked on a painted sea, tiny and perfect, sailing along the width of the leather and vanishing off the edge and appearing again at the other side. On another, a painted moon rose and set and rose again. Harry stopped in front of that one for a long time, watching the little moon, and his stomach did a slow turn of longing, though he could not have said for what. A window, maybe. He had always wanted a window. This was better than a window. This was a moon he could keep. He came to a place where the hall opened out. The shelves fell back on both sides and left a round clearing, and in the middle of the clearing stood a thing Harry took at first for a tree. It rose out of the pale floor like it had grown there, a trunk of dark wood twisted around on itself. And where the branches should have been there were instead great curling shelves, and where the leaves should have been there were books, hundreds of them, hanging open, their pages stirring in a wind. Harry could not feel, and the pages glowed very faintly, each one so that the whole tree of books was lit from within like a lamp made of moths, and the light of it fell down over a low round bench that circled the trunk, worn smooth, exactly the right height for a small person to sit on. Harry sat on it because his legs were tired and because it was there, and because it seemed to have been waiting for him. He did not think this last part in words. He only felt the bench take his weight like it had been expecting it, and he leaned his back against the warm, dark trunk, and above him the pages whispered and turned, whispered and turned, whispered and turned, and it was the gentlest sound he had ever heard. It was the sound he thought that a mother might make hushing a baby, though he had no memory of any such sound and did not know why the thought had come. He was asleep before he knew he was tired. He dreamed, though later he would not be sure it was a dream. He dreamed that the tree of books bent down over him the way Aunt Petunia bent over Dudley when Dudley was sick, though there was no anger in it and no impatience, only a great slow attention, like the attention of the sea to the moon. He dreamed that one of the hanging books drifted down and settled on his knees, and that it opened itself, page by page, and that the pages were blank, and he dreamed that as he looked at the blankness, something began to move across it, not letters because Harry could not read and the book seemed to know it, but pictures, a picture of a green hill, a picture of a fire, small and friendly, with people sitting around it, a picture of a woman with dark red hair laughing, though he could not see her face clearly and it made his chest hurt to try, and under the pictures or behind them or inside them, a feeling came to him. And the feeling was almost like a voice, though it used no words that Harry could have repeated. The feeling said, "You found me." And then, after a while, in a tone of surprise, "You are so small." In the dream, Harry said, "I'm 4, which was the most impressive fact he possessed about himself. The feeling seemed to consider this. 4, it said, the way you might say the name of a country you had heard of but never visited. And then, more gently than anything had ever been said to Harry in his waking life, "Then we have time." He did not know what that meant. He was 4. But the warmth of it stayed with him even as the dream thinned and the pictures faded, and he floated up out of sleep the way a leaf floats up through water, slowly turning into the gold. He woke because he was hungry, and being hungry was so ordinary and so much a part of his life that for a moment he thought he was in the cupboard and had dreamed the whole gold room. Then he opened his eyes and the tree of books was still there, turning its pages above him, and a sound escaped him that he did not know he had made. His stomach growled. He put his hand on it, as he did in the cupboard, to try to make it stop, because a growling stomach was another thing that Uncle Vernon did not like to hear. Above him, one of the hanging books stirred. It detached itself from the branch or the shelf or whatever it was that held it, and drifted down through the gold air, unhurried, turning gently end over end, and came to rest on the bench beside him. It was small and bound in soft brown and warm to look at, and when it settled the pages fell open of their own accord. There were pictures on the pages. Harry leaned in. There was a picture of an apple. It was so well drawn, in inks of red and green and a brown that was almost gold, that Harry's mouth watered just to look at it. He had been given an apple once, a whole one, when a neighbor had seen him in the garden looking thin and had passed it to him over the fence, and he had eaten all of it, core and seeds and stem, because he did not know when there would be another. He looked at the picture of the apple now, and the wanting rose in him so strong that he reached out, without deciding to, and put his finger on the page. The apple was cold under his finger, and round, and real. Harry pulled his hand back so fast he nearly fell off the bench. On the page where the picture of the apple had been, there was now a small empty space, an apple-shaped absence in the ink, and in his lap, having tumbled there when he flinched, was an apple. A whole apple, red on one side and green on the other, with a bead of moisture on its skin like it had just been picked. He looked at it for a long time. In the house on Privet Drive, fruit that appeared where it should not be was a trap. It was Dudley's, or it was counted, or it would be missed, and taking it would bring the thin white mouth and the large hand. Harry sat with the apple in his lap, and every instinct he had told him to put it back, though there was nowhere to put it, and the picture of it was already gone. The tree above him rustled, and the feeling came again, the almost voice, softer now, the way you speak to an animal you do not want to frighten. "It's for you," said the feeling. "That is what it is for." Harry, who had never in his memory been given a thing simply because he wanted it, turned the apple over in his hands twice, waiting still for the trick, and when the trick did not come he ate it so quickly that afterward he could not remember the taste of it, only the fact of it. The astonishing fact of a whole apple, his, uncounted, unpunished. Juice ran down his chin, and he wiped it with the back of his hand and licked the back of his hand so as to waste nothing. When it was gone, he held the core in his fingers and did not know what to do with it. And the little book bound in brown stirred, and its page turned itself to a blank leaf, and Harry understood, somehow, that he should put the core there. He set it down on the blank page. The paper drank it in without a mark, the way the floor had drunk the dust, the way the whole gold room seemed to take in the leavings of the world and quietly make them clean. "Thank you," Harry said, "because that too was a thing you were meant to say, though he had said it more often to avoid being hit than because anyone had earned it. This time he meant it, and the meaning of it surprised him. Sitting there small and full for the first time in longer than he could remember, the pages of the tree stilled all at once, every one of them, hundreds of hanging books going quiet together, and in the quiet, Harry had the very strong sense that he had done something remarkable, something no one had done here in longer than he could imagine, and that the whole vast gold hall was, in its patient and ancient way, pleased. Time did not work in the library the way it worked in the house. Harry discovered this slowly, over what might have been an afternoon or a week, because there was no window in the hall to tell him whether the sun had moved, and the gold light never changed, never dimmed, never grew hard and yellow the way the light in the cupboard did when evening came on. He explored. He was cautious at first, keeping the tree of books always in sight, darting out along one aisle and back, out along another and back, the way a small animal learns the edges of a new burrow. But the hall was patient with him, and nothing lunged out of the shadows, and no large hand came down, and by degrees his darting became wandering, and his wandering became a kind of slow, drunken joy. He found a place where the shelves were full of jars instead of books, and the jars held light. Not fire, not lamps, but light itself. Coiled and folded and sleeping. Some of it gold and some of it green, and some of it green, and some of it a blue so deep it was almost black. And when he pressed his nose to the glass, the light inside would rouse and drift toward him and press back, gently, like a cat against a window. He did not open the jars. He was not entirely without sense. But he sat among them for a long time, and they lit his face, and he talked to them the way lonely children talk to anything that will hold still, telling them about the cupboard and Dudley and the apple, and the lights pulsed softly as he spoke, and he chose to believe they were listening. One jar of green light, smaller than the rest, seemed to follow him with particular attention, drifting to whichever side of its glass was nearest him, and when at last he stood to go it pressed itself flat against the glass like it did not want him to leave. And he pressed his hand to the outside and they stayed like that a moment, the child and the light, palm to palm through the cold glass. He found a fountain that ran with something that was not water, though it moved like water. A slow silver that climbed up out of a basin and hung in the air in a shape like a tree, or a hand, or a word, and then fell back and rose again in a different shape, endlessly, patiently, making and unmaking itself. When Harry laughed at it, the silver leapt up into the shape of a laughing mouth, and he laughed harder, and it made a face back at him. And he sat on the edge of the basin and played with the fountain as he had never been allowed to play with the garden hose, until his sides ached and he had forgotten, for whole minutes at a stretch, that he had ever been anything but happy. He tried to catch the silver in his cupped hands, and it ran through his fingers cool and quick, and left them dry. And he tried again, and it let him hold it for the length of one breath before it poured itself back into the basin. And he understood the game of it, that it wanted to be chased and never quite caught, and that this was a kindness, because a game you win too easily is soon over. He found, too, a small side room off the main hall where the ceiling was not a ceiling. He wandered into it chasing a moth of light that had drifted off one of the jars, and he looked up, and there was weather up there. Not a painting of weather. Weather gray sky no higher than the top of the shelves, with real clouds moving across it, and as Harry watched, a few drops of rain fell, warm and soft, and landed on his upturned face, and he laughed and put out his tongue to catch them as he had never been allowed to do in the garden, and then the little clouds thinned and parted and the small sun came out and dried his face, and a ribbon of colors bent across the tiny sky, a rainbow of the length of his arm, close enough that he stood on his tone, faintly gretted grain, that way for an hour. He did not urshed this room at all, and did not need to. He lay on the floor of it and watched a whole day's weather pass over him in the space of a few minutes, dawn to storm to clearing to a handful of stars, and it was, he decided, the best room he had ever been in, better even than the room with the jars, and he told the library so, and the library seemed pleased, and told him it had been made for a child, long ago, who had been afraid of thunder, so that she could learn that a storm always passes, and Harry, who had a great deal to be afraid of, and no one to heed him, and he found the writing. It was on the walls, in the places where the shelves left off, high up and low down, carved into the pale stone and inked into it, and in some places seeming to have grown into it the way veins grow through a leaf, long ropes of it, curling and interlocking in shapes Harry had never seen. He could not read. No one had troubled to teach him his letters, and the few he knew he had gathered from cereal boxes in the spines of Dudley's untouched books. But he stood before the writing on the walls and traced the shapes in the air with one grubby finger, and the longer he looked, the more the shapes seemed to want to be understood, the way a picture in a book wants to be a real thing. The way the apple had wanted to leave the page, he was tracing a particularly beautiful loop of it, one that curled back on itself like a sleeping snake, when the almost voice came again. "You want to know what it says?" Harry nodded. He had learned by now that the voice could feel him nod, that it did not need him to speak, and this suited him, because he had never been a talkative child and the house had taught him that words drew attention and attention was dangerous. "That one is a name," said the voice. And Harry felt, rather than heard, the shape of the name, though he could not have spelled it or said it aloud. It was a warm name. It made him think of hearts and of bread. "It's the name of the one who built this hall," the voice went on. "She wanted a place where nothing true would ever be lost, where anyone who came honestly wanting to know would be answered." "Anyone?" Harry said. He was thinking of the apple. He was thinking of the fact that no one had ever answered him honestly about anything, that the story of his own mother and father was two ugly words, drunk and crash, dealt out by Uncle Vernon like a slap, and that when he had asked, once, what they had looked like, he had been sent to the cupboard for asking. "Anyone," said the voice. "But she has been gone a long time, little one. And so have all the others who knew how to open the door. It has been 1,000 years and more since a living hand touched these shelves. I had begun to think the world had forgotten us on purpose." Harry did not understand most of this. 1,000 was a number too large to hold, but he understood forgotten. He understood being left in the dark and made to wait until he was needed and having no one come. He put his hand flat against the wall, over the warm name carved into the stone, as he had put his hand against the wall of the cupboard. And he said, with the whole clumsy sincerity of a 4-year-old, "I won't forget you." The gold light in the hall brightened, only a little, only the way a face brightens. But Harry saw it, and he felt the warmth of it on the backs of his hands, and something between him and the great patient presence of the library shifted and settled, quietly, the way two things settle when they have decided to belong to each other. "What's your name?" he asked, because it seemed rude now not to. The voice was quiet a while. "I have had many," it said at last. "The ones who built me each called me something different, and each name was true, and none of them was the whole of it. You may call me what you like. I have waited a long time to be called anything at all." Harry thought about this with the terrible seriousness of the very young. He looked up at the shelves going up and up into the gold, and at the tree of books turning its pages in the distance, and at the light warming his hands, and he tried out several names under his breath, and none of them fit, because they were all too small. Finally, he said, "I'll just call you, like, hello you. Is that all right?" And the library, which had been named by kings and by scholars and by the first men and women ever to bend the world with a word, and which had outlived every one of them, decided that in all its long memory, it had never been given a name it liked so well. "That is all right," it said. "Hello, you." Harry laughed, delighted, and the laugh went up into the shelves, and this time it did come back faintly from very high up, like the whole hall had laughed with him. The first thing the library taught him was not a spell, it was a shape. They were back at the tree, Harry sitting on the worn round bench with his knees drawn up, and he had been trying, with the stub of his own tongue poked out in concentration, to draw one of the wall shapes in the dust of his palm, except that there was no dust in the library, so his finger only slid over clean skin and left nothing behind. He kept trying anyway. He wanted, very much, to make the loop that curled back on itself like a sleeping snake, the beautiful one, and his finger would not remember the way of it, and a hot frustration was building in him, the kind that in the house came just before he did something that got him shouted at. "You are pushing," said the library, before the frustration could crest. "Watch." One of the hanging books came down. It was larger than the apple book, bound in gray that shimmered like the inside of a mussel shell, and it settled open on Harry's knees, and its pages were the palest blue, like a sky that had not quite decided to be morning. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, at the top of the left page, a single dot of dark ink welled up out of the paper, the way a bead of water wells up out of turned earth. It sat there. Harry watched it, cross-eyed with attention. "Do not try to hold it," said the library. "Only follow." The dot moved. It began to travel across the page, slow as a snail, and it left a line of ink behind it, and the line was the loop. The sleeping snake loop, forming itself stroke by stroke in front of his eyes. Harry's finger twitched to chase it, and the library said gently, "No." Not the finger yet. The eye first. And so Harry followed with his eyes instead, and it was strange, because following with the eyes was harder than following with the hand. It made a muscle work behind his forehead that he had never used, but the ink was patient, and it went slowly, and it waited at each turn until his eyes had caught up, and by the time the dot had traveled all the way round and closed the loop and sunk back down into the paper, something in Harry had changed. He could feel the shape now, not in his finger, in the place behind his eyes. He held it there, whole, glowing faintly, as he had held the moon on the book spine and wanted to keep it. "Now," said the library, "the finger." And Harry lifted his finger and drew the loop in the air, and it came, all at once, the whole shape flowing out of him without a single wrong turn, because he was not making it up as he went, he was copying a thing he already had, and the difference between those two was the first true lesson of his life. He drew it again, and on the third time a thin thread of gold ran out from his fingertip and hung in the air where he had drawn, glowing, holding the shape for the space of 3 breaths before it faded, and Harry stopped breathing entirely, staring at the gold loop hanging in front of him, made by his own hand, glowing with the light he had carried out of the jars and the lamps and the walls of this impossible place. "I did that," he said. It was not a question. It was almost an accusation, flung at a world that had told him over and over in 100 small cruelties that he could not do anything at all. You did that, agreed the library, and Harry could feel that it was pleased, and more than pleased, that under the pleasure there was something older and stranger. Something like the way a very old person looks at a very young one and sees, folded up inside the child, all the years the child does not know are coming. What does it mean, the shape? It is the beginning of a word, said the library. Not a word you speak. A word you make. This one means, roughly, more than any of your words can hold at once, but the nearest I can give you is, to open gently. It is the first word the first of us learned, because before you can do anything else with the world, you must learn to ask it to open, and to ask gently, so that it opens like a flower and not like a wound. Harry looked at his fingertip, where the last of the gold had faded. To open gently. He thought of the wall in the cupboard, going soft under his hands. He thought of the crack of light widening without a creak. He had done that, he realized, before he had ever known the shape, done it with wanting, alone, clumsily, the way a baby swims before it can walk, and now he had the shape. And the shape was the same thing made neat, made careful, made his to call on rather than his to stumble into. Do not try the others yet, said the library, feeling the greed rise in him, the way any child's greed rises when the first sweet has been good. There are shapes on these walls that would take the fingers off a grown man who made them wrong, and shapes that would open things far better left shut. That is why I begin you here, with the gentlest one, the one that has never harmed anyone. When you can make this one in your sleep, we will find the next. And Harry heard in that, we will find the next, a promise of days and days, a future that stretched out gold and warm and full, and he hugged his knees and grinned at the tree of books until his cheeks hurt. He practiced the loop until his eyes were heavy. Even after the gold thread stopped coming, even when his finger only cut clean air, he kept drawing it over and over, feeling the shape settle deeper into the place behind his eyes. And the library watched him and did not hurry him. And when at last his hand slowed and his chin dropped toward his chest, one of the great blue pages of the shape book lifted very softly and folded itself over him like a wing. The trouble, of course, was the door. Harry did not want to go back. This was so obvious to him, so total, that he did not even frame it as a choice for a long while. The gold hall was warm, and the tree gave him apples, and the fountain played with him, and the lights leaned toward him in their jars, and no one here had ever once looked at him as she looked at a stain. Why would he go back? But somewhere at the bottom of him, underneath the joy, there was a cold knowledge, the kind of knowledge that lives in the bodies of children who have learned that safety is a thing that ends. He knew that he could not stay. He did not know why. He only knew it as he knew the warm feeling before it spilled, certainly, wordlessly, from a place deeper than thinking. The boys knew it too. You have to go back, it said, when Harry had curled up on the bench beneath the tree for what he thought might be the third sleep or the fourth. It said it gently, but it said it, and Harry felt the words land in him like small stones dropped into a well. I don't want to. His voice was very small under the great gold ceiling. I know, but there is a woman above who will be looking for you soon, and if she does not find you, there will be men and lights and questions, and they will find the wall in your cupboard soft, and they will come here. And the voice paused, and when it went on, there was something in it that Harry, young as he was, recognized, because it was the same thing that lived in him, a fear of being taken away, of being pulled up into the hard, bright world and pinned there like a moth on a board. They must not find this place, little one. Not yet. Not until it is strong again, and you are grown enough to keep it secret. Do you understand? Harry did not entirely, but he heard not yet, and not yet was better than never, and he seized on it with both hands. Can I come back? The tree above him rustled, all its hundreds of pages, like a great slow breath let out. You are the only one who can, said the library. The wall opened to you because of what you are, and it will open to you again, and only to you. This is the thing you must understand, and it is the most important thing, so I will say it as plainly as I know how. And Harry sat up straight, because he could feel that this mattered, as he could feel a storm coming before the first drop fell. You are not a small mistake that the world made, said the library. You are not the thing that woman thinks you are. You are the child of people who could have opened this door, and there are people before them back and back to the ones who carved these walls. There is old magic in you, sleeping the way the light sleeps in the jars. And it has been so lonely down here, so long, that when your loneliness touched the wall, the two of them knew each other, and the wall remembered that it had once been a door. Harry did not cry, because he had trained himself long ago not to cry over words, but something moved in his throat, and his eyes stung, and he pressed the heels of his hands against them as he did in the cupboard, and the library waited, patient as stone, while the small storm passed. It did not tell him to stop. It did not sigh, or click its tongue, or grow hard around the edges. It simply waited, and its waiting was a kind of holding, and Harry cried a little in the warmth of it, not from grief, but from the strange, unfamiliar pressure of being, for once, allowed. Old magic, he said at last, thickly, trying the words out. They tasted strange and enormous in his mouth. Yours, said the library, and mine to teach you, if you'll let me, a little at a time, as much as you can hold, and no more, so that it grows in you the way you grow, and never faster. And the voice warmed, and Harry felt it settle over him like the blanket he had wished for in the cupboard, the blanket that had never come. We have time. It said again, the thing it had said in the dream. "You are so small, and we have so much time. Now, let me show you the way home before she calls." The way home was the tree. Harry had not understood this, but the library showed him. When he stood before the twisted trunk and wished himself back as he had wished himself away, the shelves of hanging books drew apart, and behind them was the crack of ordinary gray wall, the underside of the stairs, the thin mattress, the pencil-drawn window that had never let in any light. It looked so small. It looked so mean and dim and small, and Harry stood on the warm gold floor and looked into the dark of his own life, and did not want to go. And for a moment the wanting not to was so fierce that he thought he might simply sit down on the floor and refuse, the way Dudley refused, screaming and got whatever he screamed for. But Harry was not Dudley, and he had learned long ago that screaming got him nothing but worse. So he swallowed the wanting down. "Before you go," said the library, "hold out your hand." He held it out. He half expected another apple, and his stomach, treacherous, leapt at the thought. But no apple came. Instead, the gold light of the hall seemed to gather itself, to draw in from the far shelves and the high walkways and the sleeping lamps, to pool in the air above his open palm, and then to sink down into it, into his skin, warm and then warmer, until his whole hand glowed from the inside like a shell held up to a lamp. It did not hurt. It felt like the warm feeling in the cupboard, the one that had always come before the strange things, except that now it did not want to spill. Now it lay quiet in his hand, folded up small, patient, his. "That is a little of the light," said the library. "Not to use. Not yet. Just to carry. So that when you are in the dark up there, and it is cold, and you think you dreamed all of this, you can look at your hand, and you will see that you did not." Harry curled his fingers over the light. He could still feel it in there, a small warmth, like holding a bird whose heart he could feel beating against his palm. "Will you still be here?" he asked. "When I come back?" The whole hall seemed to breathe. "I have been here 1,000 years waiting for someone who never came," said the library. And there was something in it now that was almost laughter, warm and old and impossibly kind. "I think I can manage a little longer, now that someone has. How will I get back in, if the wall's just a wall again?" "Put your hand where you put it before," said the library, "and do not wish yourself away this time. Wish yourself here. Wish yourself home. The word will do the rest because the word will be true." And Harry felt, in the almost voice, the enormous care with which it had chosen that word, home, and offered it to a child who had never once, in 4 years, had a place he could rightly call by it. And Harry, 4 years old, with a stolen apple in his belly and a fold of ancient light in his hand and the first true kindness of his short life ringing in him like that long low bell, crawled back through the crack in the wall, into the cupboard under the stairs, and the gold light narrowed behind him, and the plaster grew firm, and the wall was only a wall again. He lay on the thin mattress. Above him, the diagonal beams marched away into the dark like the ribs of a sleeping animal. Somewhere in the house, Dudley was thundering down the stairs, and Aunt Petunia was saying something sharp, and the ordinary machinery of Privet Drive ground on, indifferent, unaware that anything at all had changed. The latch had not been lifted. No time at all had passed up here, it seemed, though whole days had passed below. The library kept its own hours and lent them to him freely, and this, though he did not yet grasp it, was among the greatest of the gifts it would give him. Harry opened his hand. In the dark of the cupboard, his palm was glowing, very faintly, gold. He closed his fingers over it and held it against his chest, over the middle of himself, over the place where the warm feeling lived, and for the first time that he could remember, he fell asleep in that house without any fear at all, because he was not, any longer, entirely alone. He had a secret now. He had a friend older than the world. And in the dark behind the wall, patient as stone and glad as morning, the lost library of the first wizard settled back into its long gold quiet and waited, and did not have to wait alone. Chapter 1. End. Chapter 2. The hall where the books talk back. By the time Harry was 5 and a half, he had learned to count the days between visits the way a prisoner counts them, in scratches, except that his scratches were secret and lived inside his head. School had started, which was both a torment and a mercy. A torment because Dudley and his friends had made a game called Harry Hunting and were good at it, and a mercy because school meant hours away from the house, and hours away from the house meant that when he was sent to the cupboard in the evening, no one checked on him, and no one checking on him meant the door. He had gotten better at the door. The first months, it had opened only when he was miserable, only when the wanting to be elsewhere rose in him strong enough to spill, and he had hated that. A little. Hated that the way in seemed to be paved with his own unhappiness, like the library could only find him when he hurt. But the library had taught him otherwise. "Put your hand where you put it before," it had said, "and do not wish yourself away. Wish yourself here." And so he had practiced wishing himself toward a thing instead of away from one, which was a harder wish and a better one. And by his 5th summer, he could open the wall on a full stomach and a quiet heart, simply because he wanted to come, and that turned out to be the truer key. Tonight he came the ordinary way, hand flat on the gray plaster, the loop shape drawn small and neat in the air with his other hand, because the library had taught him that too, that the gentle opening word made the way smoother, and the wall drew back like frost from a breath, and the gold spilled out, and he crawled through into the warm, but the tree was not where he came out. That had never happened before. Every time until now, the crack had let him out at the foot of the great twisted tree of books, in the round clearing with the worn bench, and he had come to think of that clearing as a kind of front hall. The place you arrive. Tonight he crawled through the light, and stood up, and the tree was nowhere. He was in a corridor he had never seen, narrower than the great hall, its shelves close enough on either side that he could have touched both at once had he stretched his arms, and the light here was not the steady gold of the main hall, but something dimmer and stranger. A light that seemed to come from the books themselves, each spine holding its own small glow, so that the corridor was lit the way a night street is lit. Unevenly, in pools, and it was loud. Not loud like the house. Not shouting, not the television turned up, not Dudley's tantrums. It was a loud made of small sounds all at once, a murmuring, a rustling, a whispering that came from every shelf at every height, hundreds and hundreds of voices, none of them louder than a breath, but all of them together making a sound like a distant crowd, like the sea heard from far inland, like a forest full of things that talk when they think no one is listening. Harry stood very still. "Hello?" he said. The murmuring stopped. It stopped the way a room of gossiping grown-ups stops when a child walks in, all at once and guilty, and in the sudden hush, Harry could hear his own heart going and the small hiss of the booklights and nothing else. Then, from a shelf level with his shoulder, a single small voice said, quite clearly, in a tone of enormous astonishment, "It's a boy." And the corridor exploded into noise. Every book on every shelf began to talk at once, and now Harry could hear the words, and the words were about him. A boy, did you see? An actual boy. How did he, no one's come in age, look at the size of him. Is he lost? Is he real? Pinch him, someone. Don't pinch him. You'll frighten him. He looks frightened already, of course he's frightened. You're all shrieking. The voices were high and low and cracked and smooth. Some of them slow and grand, like they had a great deal of dignity to protect, and some of them quick and squeaky as mice. And they were arguing with each other, interrupting each other, and one deep voice from high up kept saying over and over with the patience of the very deaf, "What? What did he say? Speak up, speak up!" Until a whole shelf of thinner voices shouted back, "Hey, say hello, grandfather!" And the deaf one said, "Well, hello to you too, whoever you are," in a tone of great satisfaction. Harry began, helplessly, to laugh. He could not help it. He had spent his whole life being talked over, talked at, talked about while he stood right there, unseen, and here was a whole corridor of books doing exactly that, and it should have hurt the way it hurt in a house, and it did not, because there was no cruelty in it, only a wild and total curiosity, the curiosity of things that have been shut up alone with each other for 1,000 years, and have suddenly, wonderfully, got something new to look at. They were not talking about him the way the Dursleys talked about him, to make him small. They were talking about him the way you talk about a comet. "He's laughing," said a delighted voice near his knee. "Oh, he's a nice one. The last one who came never laughed once." The murmuring dropped abruptly to a hush again, and this hush had a different shape. It had guilt in it, and warning, the way a group of children go quiet when one of them has said the thing you are not supposed to say. "The last one?" Harry said. For a moment, none of the books answered. Then, from the shelf by his shoulder, the small, clear voice that had first announced him said in a smaller way, "You're not supposed to talk about the last one." She said. Who said? Her. "You," said the book. And Harry understood that the book meant the library, meant his you, and that even these chattering things were, in their way, under its care and its rules. He did not push. He had learned in the house exactly how it felt to be pushed on a thing you had been told not to say, and he did not like doing it to anyone, even a book, but he filed the strangeness of it somewhere in the back of his mind, next to the other strange thing, the thing the library had said in his very first days about having waited for someone who never came. The last one, someone had come before him. He turned the two together in the dark of his thoughts, and then he set them down, because a book near his foot was tugging at his attention, physically, its pages fluttering to make a small wind against his ankle like a cat winding round his leg. "Read me," said the book at his foot. "Please, oh please, it's been so long, read me, read me." And all at once every book in the corridor took up the cry, and it was not frightening, it was heartbreaking, a whole hall of voices pleading, read me, pick me up, open me, it has been so long I have such things to tell," until Harry had to put his hands over his ears, not against the volume but against the sheer weight of the wanting, so much wanting, so like his own. "Enough," said the library. It did not shout. It never shouted. But the word came down through the whole corridor like a hand laid gently over a crowd, and the voices fell silent, all at once, the way the murmuring had fallen silent when he first spoke. And into the quiet the library said, "You will frighten him, and you will make him sad, and neither of those is why I brought him here. Be patient. You have all been patient 1,000 years. You can be patient an hour more." The book subsided into a low contrite rustling. like a class that has been told off, and Harry took his hands from his ears. "Welcome," said the library. To him now, and only to him, the almost voice close and warm behind his ears the way it always was. "This is the long corridor. I do not bring you here first because it is a great deal to meet all at once, as you can hear. But you are ready for it now, I think. You wanted to read. Well, here is where the reading lives." He had wanted to read. That was true, and the library had known it because the library knew most of what Harry wanted before Harry did. The wanting had started with the shapebook, the pale blue one that had taught him the gentle opening word, learning that one shape had opened the door in him wider than the one in the wall. He had gone back to the ordinary world and looked at the cereal boxes and the road signs and the spines of Dudley's untouched books, and where before the letters had been only ugly little marks that other people seemed to understand for reasons kept secret from him, now he saw shapes, shapes that meant things, shapes that wanted to be understood, the way the wall writing wanted to be understood. And he had felt for the first time the specific and burning unfairness of being 5 years old and unable to read, of standing outside a door that every other child his age was being handed the key to, while no one troubled to hand him his. His teacher at school, a tired kind woman named Mrs. Pruitt, had noticed him lingering over the alphabet frieze above the blackboard, and had spent 10 minutes one wet lunchtime showing him his letters. A is for apple, B is for ball, and Harry had drunk it down so fast and so hard that she had gone quiet and looked at him strangely, and the next day there had been a note sent home. And the note had earned him a night in the cupboard, because Aunt Petunia did not like notes sent home. And the note had earned him a night in the cupboard, because Aunt Petunia did not like notes, and did not like a Harry being clever. What did she eat it to? So Harry had learned to hide it. He had learned to get his sums wrong on purpose, to read slower than he could, to be, in the daylight world, exactly as dull as it was safe to be. And all the reading he truly wanted, all the hunger of it, he had carried down here into the gold and set it at the feet of the only teacher who had ever been glad to find him quick. "I can read a bit," he told the library now, standing in the long corridor with the contrite books rustling all around. "Small words. Mrs. Pruitt showed me, and I worked out some off the shapes. He flushed. He still stumbled on the hard ones aloud. "I know," said the library. "I have watched you sound them out under the blankets by the light in your hand, which I did not give you to read by, and which you used to read by anyway, and that told me more about you than 100 spells could." And Harry heard the smile in it and stood a little taller. "The books here can teach you faster than any frieze on any wall, but they are not gentle, most of them, not because they are unkind, but because they have forgotten how loud they are, and they have a great deal to say. So I will choose the first for you. Go to the end of the corridor. The little green one on the shelf you can reach. It has been asking for you since you crawled in." Harry went. The books watched him pass, and now they held their tongues. Though he could feel them holding them, could feel the effort of it like the pressure before a sneeze, and here and there one could not help itself and let out a tiny whispered hello, or a "there he goes" before the others shushed it. At the end of the corridor, on a shelf exactly at the height of his outstretched hand, was a small book bound in green cloth gone soft and pale at the corners, and it was trembling. Actually trembling, its pages shivering with what Harry recognized because he had felt it so many mornings as the effort of holding still when every part of you wants to move. "Are you the one that wants me?" Harry asked it. "Yes," said the green book in a voice like a small door opening. "Oh yes. Take me down. Careful. My spine's not what it was." Harry took it down, careful, and carried it to the floor and sat with his back against the shelves and the green book open on his crossed legs, and its pages were cream and its letters were large and round and friendly, nothing like the crab wall writing, and Harry understood that this book had been made for beginners, made for children, 1,000 years ago, and had sat here all that time with no child to teach. "What are you about?" he asked. "Beasts," said the green book proudly. "I'm a book of beasts. The kind, the fierce, the shy, the ones that are gone now, and the ones that were never quite real. Would you like to see a bowtruckle? Everyone always likes a bowtruckle to start." "I don't know what that is," Harry admitted. "Then you certainly should," said the book, and turned its own page. The bowtruckle came off the paper. Harry had thought when the apple came off the page in his first days that he had seen the most wonderful thing a book could do. He had been wrong. The apple had only fallen out of its picture, a picture thing made real. The bowtruckle climbed out. It was a small creature, no bigger than Harry's hand, and it looked exactly like a little person made of twigs and green leaves, with 2 bright brown eyes like berries and long clever fingers, and it climbed up out of the flat drawing of itself, the way a real creature climbs out of long grass, testing the air, and it stood on the open page and turned its twiggy head and looked at Harry. And Harry looked at it, and neither of them moved. "Don't grab," murmured the book. "They hate to be grabbed. Hold out a finger slow, and let it decide." Harry held out a finger, slow, the way you would to a bird, and the bowtruckle considered the finger with its head on one side, and then it walked across the page on its little stick legs and wrapped one twiggy hand around the tip of Harry's finger and hung there, light as a leaf, weighing nothing, and Harry felt its grip, dry and delicate and alive, and made a sound that was not quite a word, a sound of pure wonder pushed out of him before he could stop it. "There," said the book, pleased. "Now you've met a bowtruckle. They guard the trees the wandwood comes from. fierce as anything if you go at their tree, but gentle enough if you bring them a woodlouse. Have you got a woodlouse?" "No," Harry whispered, afraid to move his finger. "Pity, they love a woodlouse. Well, he'll go back in a moment. They don't like to be out of their tree for long. Turn the page when he does, and I'll show you something bigger." The ball-trickle hung on Harry's finger a moment more, and its berry eyes blinked once, and then it let go and skittered back into its picture and became, again, flat ink on green paper, a drawing of a twig creature that gave no sign it had ever moved. Harry stared at the picture. He put his finger where the small dry grip had been and could still feel the ghost of it. "Turn the page," said the book, gently, and Harry turned the page. Over the next hour, or the next 3, or however long it was in the goldless, timeless deep of the library, the green book showed Harry its beasts. Not all of them came off the page. Some were too large, and the book, wise about its own limits, only let those rise up as pictures that moved. A great serpent uncoiling across a double spread, a herd of winged horses galloping from the left page to the right and off the edge and back again. But the small ones came out. A niffler, black and fat and greedy, that dug in the seams of Harry's pajamas for anything shiny, and, finding nothing, sulked its way back into its picture with an almost human huff. A tiny firecrab whose shell glowed like an ember, which the book warned him not to touch, and which Harry did not touch. Watching it trundle along the gutter of the page, leaving a faint scorch that healed itself the moment the creature passed. A flock of billywigs, blue and buzzing, that rose off the page in a cloud and hovered around Harry's head and made him giggle helplessly as they tangled in his hair, until the book said, "That's enough, back you go," and they streamed back down into their picture like water down a drain. And Harry, without noticing he was doing it, was reading. That was the trick of it, and the kindness of it, and he did not see it until much later. Under each beast, the green book had its name and its nature written out in the large, round, friendly letters, and Harry, greedy to know more about each wonderful thing, bent close and sounded the words out, and because he wanted to know them, because a bowtruckle was standing on his finger and he wanted to know what a bowtruckle was for, the words went in and stayed in a way that a bowtruckle was for. The words went in and stayed in a way that A is for apple on a school frieze never could. He read Guardian of Wand Trees. He read Attracted to Shiny Objects. He read Do Not Provoke, and provoke was a hard word, and he chewed it and cracked it and got it, and it stayed got, because it mattered. By the end he was reading whole sentences aloud without stumbling, and he did not know he was doing it, and the green book knew, and said nothing. And up and down the long corridor the other books had gone very quiet, listening, hundreds of them listening to a 5-year-old read, and it was the sound they had waited 1,000 years to hear, and not one of them spoiled it. Not all the books were as sweet as the green one. Harry learned this the day a tall, narrow volume, bound in black with silver on its edges, spoke up from a high shelf in a voice like a man who was used to being agreed with. "The Beast Book is all very well for infants," it said, "but if the child is to learn anything of consequence, he had better start with me. I am the definitive account of the founding. There are others," and here its voice dripped, "who will tell you they know the story. They are wrong. You are a pompous old windbag," said a squat red book 2 shelves down promptly. "And half your dates are made up." "My dates," said the black book, "are impeccable." "Your dates," said the red book, "are a disgrace, and everyone in this corridor knows it, and the only reason no one said so to your face in 500 years is that no one could bear to listen to you defend them." Harry stood between the 2 shelves with his head going back and forth like someone at a very slow tennis match, uncertain whether to be alarmed. The books were shouting now, or the book version of shouting, their pages riffling with indignation, and other volumes were taking sides, a whole faction up near the ceiling backing the black book with cries of here, here, and a rowdier crowd near the floor cheering the red one on, and the deaf grandfather high up was demanding to know who had died. "Stop it," Harry said. Then, louder, because they did not stop, "Stop it." They stopped. It was, he would realize later, one of the small strangenesses of the library that when he truly meant a thing, things tended to happen. But at the time he only knew that the corridor had gone quiet and both books were, somehow, looking at him. "You can't both be right about the dates," Harry said reasonably, in the careful flat voice he used at school to keep out of trouble. "So why don't you both tell me, and I'll listen to both, and I'll decide." There was a scandalized silence. "He'll decide," repeated the black book faintly. "The child will decide," agreed the red book. And there was a lilt in it now, because nothing in 500 years had annoyed the black book so thoroughly, and it could tell. And so Harry sat on the floor between them and listened to 2 accounts of the same 1,000-year-old story, and they were different, and where they differed, he asked why, and the books, forced to explain themselves to someone who would not simply take their word, discovered that they rather enjoyed it, that being questioned by a mind that wanted to understand was a great deal better than being agreed with by shelves too polite to argue. By the end, the black book had admitted with agonized dignity that 2 of its dates were perhaps approximate, and the red book had conceded that the black book's account of the actual building, stone by stone, was not without merit for a windbag, and both of them, Harry understood, were happier than they had been in centuries, because he had made them think. "You did that on purpose," said the library, warm and amused, when Harry finally left them to their newly civil bickering. Did what? Made peace by making them work. And Harry, that is a kind of magic too. Older than the shapes, and there is no book on any shelf that can teach it. And you did it at 5 years old, without knowing you had done anything at all. The library was quiet a moment. The woman who built this place would have liked you very much, it said. That is not a small thing for me to say. Harry did not know what to say back, so he said nothing, and glowed, quietly, all the way home. You tricked me, Harry said when he finally understood. He said it with the green book closed against his chest and his voice full of something that took him a moment to recognize as delight, because the light had been rare enough in his life that he did not always know its face. You made me read, you made it so I had to, so I would. I did no such thing, said the green book, with enormous dignity. I showed you beasts. If you chose to read about them, that is entirely your own affair and reflects very well on your character. Above and behind him, all through the corridor, the books were laughing, that low, rustling laugh like wind in autumn, and the deaf one high up was saying, "What's funny? What's funny? What's funny?" And being told in a chorus, "The chilled can read, Father," and the deaf one saying, "Well, of course he can. What did you expect? A literate child wandering in here? Ridiculous," in a tone of such vast pride that Harry laughed too. "You see now why I did not bring you here first," said the library, warm behind his ears. "They are a great deal. But they love a reader more than anything in the world, and they have had no one to love for longer than your whole country has had a name. You have made them very happy tonight." Harry looked up and down the corridor, at the hundreds of glowing spines, at all the voices that had pleaded read me and were now, out of love or discipline or both, holding themselves still so as not to overwhelm him. And a thought came to him. A large thought for a small boy, the kind of thought that arrives all at once and changes the shape of a person a little. "They're lonely," he said. "Aren't they? Like you were, like..." He did not finish it. He did not say like me. He did not have to. "Yes," said the library, and did not soften it, because it had learned in its 1,000 years that softening a true thing is a way of lying, and it did not lie to Harry. "They are lonely. A book that is never read is the loneliest thing there is, lonelier than an empty room, because a book is made to be opened, made to give what it holds, and to hold and never give is a kind of slow starving. You cannot read them all, little one. There are more here than you could read in 10 lifetimes. But you can read some, and you have no idea, none, what it means to them that some is more than none." Harry sat with the green book against his chest and looked at all the lonely lights, and he made a decision, the private absolute decision of a child, the kind adults forget they were ever capable of. He would read them, as many as he could. He would come and come and come, and he would open them one by one, and let them give what they had held so long, and he would not let a single one of them believe ever again that it had been forgotten. He did not say this aloud, but the library felt it, felt the shape of the vow take form in him, and for a moment the whole long corridor brightened, every spine at once, gold and green and blue, like the books had heard it too, like hope had gone through them like a current. And in the brightening Harry saw, just for an instant, far down at the corridor's end, a door he had not noticed before, a low, dark door set into the shelves, closed, and different from everything else, and old in a way that even this old place was not old. Then the brightness faded, and the door was lost in shadow again, and Harry, who had a great deal on his mind, forgot it for now. The green book taught him to read, but it was a book 2 shelves up and to the left, a fat brown thing with a cracked voice like a grandfather's. That first taught him what reading was for. It happened on his next visit, or the one after. He had gone straight to the long corridor, unable to stay away, and the books had greeted him by name now, because he had told them his name, all of them shouting it at once in that first mad rush. "Harry! Harry! His name is Harry!" And it had done something to him to hear his name shouted with joy instead of with anger, done something he could not have explained and did not try to. He had read 3 more of the Green Beast books chapters, and then, full and happy, he had asked the corridor at large, "What else is there? Not beasts, something else." And a dozen books had shouted their subjects at once: history, herbs, the reading of stars, the naming of winds, the courtesy owed to a river, until the library hushed them and the fat brown grandfather book cleared its throat, which for a book meant a small dry rustle of its opening pages, and said, "If the young gentleman will permit, I am a book of stories, true ones." Would he care for a story? Harry, who had been told exactly one true story in his life, and that a cruel one, about a car in a crash, said yes so quickly that the word tripped over itself coming out. So the grandfather book told him a story. It was the story of the woman whose warm, bready name was carved on the wall of the first hall, the one who had built the library, and it was a long story, and Harry did not understand all of it, but he understood the shape of it, that once, very long ago, magic had not been hidden, that there had been people who could do the strange things Harry could do, the wall-softening things, the light-carrying things, and that they had not been hunted for it, not yet, but they had been rare and scattered, and each of them had had to work out their gift alone, in secret, the way Harry was working out his, making the same mistakes over and over with no one to say no, not like that, like this, and that the woman with the bready name had thought this a waste and a cruelty. All those lonely gifted children reinventing the world in the dark, and she had gone up and down the land gathering everything anyone knew. Every word that opened and every word that mended and every name of every beast, and she had built a place to keep it. A place where nothing true would ever be lost, so that no gifted child would ever again have to be alone with a gift too big to carry. And then what happened? Harry asked when the book paused. Why is it all secret now? Why is it under the stairs? The grandfather book was quiet a while. That, it said, is a longer story, and a sadder one, and not mine to tell. Ask her. And Harry felt the library go still around him. The particular stillness it had, he was learning. When a thing had come near that it did not wish to speak of, and he let it lie. Because he had learned in the house never to chase a grown-up into a corner they had backed away from, that the chasing only ended one way. But he thought about it, lying in his cupboard that night, the light glowing faintly in his cupped hand. A place where nothing true would ever be lost. And yet it was lost, wasn't it? It was buried under a suburban house in Surrey, and no one in all the world knew it was there, except one 5-year-old boy who was not supposed to be clever. Something had gone wrong. Something had gone very wrong, a long time ago, and the library carried it the way Harry carried his own bruises, quietly, under the clothes where it did not show. He resolved to be gentle about it. He was good at being gentle about hidden hurts. He had a great deal of practice with his own, and the library, which could feel the resolve form in him even from up here through the wall, even in the dark, was so moved by it, this small battered child resolving to be careful of an ancient sorrow that was not his fault and not his burden, that if a 1,000-year-old library could be said to do such a thing, it came very near to weeping, there in the gold, alone, and glad, and no longer alone. There was one book he came back to more than any other that year, and it was the strangest of all. It lived apart from the rest, in a little alcove off the corridor. And it did not shout, did not plead, did not so much as stir when he passed. It was a wide, flat book bound in dark blue, cold to the touch even in the warm library, and when Harry first eased it open, nothing came off the page and no voice spoke. The pages were black, only black edge to edge, so dark they seemed to have a depth to them, and Harry had almost closed it again, disappointed when he tilted it toward the booklight and saw that the black was not empty. It was full of tiny points of silver scattered across the dark, and as he looked they began, very slowly, to turn. "It's the sky," he said aloud, wondering. "It is the sky," agreed a voice, and it was the softest voice in the corridor, slow and cool and far away, like a voice heard across water at night. "Every sky. The one over your house tonight, if you like. Or the one the builders watched 1,000 years gone. Or skies no one living has seen. Would you care to lie down?" So he lay on his back on the warm stone floor and held the star book open above his face, and the moment he was still, the black of the pages seemed to lift away from the paper and rise up, out and over him, spreading across the whole ceiling of the corridor and beyond it, swallowing the shelves and the book lights and the walls, until Harry was lying on the floor of the library under an entire night sky, a sky deeper and wider, crowded with stars than any had e'er, at an enormous spakworth street treak. "That one," said the soft, cool voice, and a single star seemed to brighten. "The builders called the anchor because it does not move while the others wheel. Sailors steered by it. Lost children were told to find it and stand still and wait to be found. And that string of them, there, like a bent nail the plow, some say, the bear, others." And the star book told him the sky patiently, name by name, the way the whisper book had told him the winds, and Harry lay on the floor of a buried under the turning heavens and learned the names of the stars, and some ache in him that had been there so long he had stopped feeling it. The ache of a boy with no one to point things out to him. Eased one named star at a time, when at last the sky sank back down into the pages and he was only a small person lying on a stone floor holding a flat blue book. Harry lay still a while longer, and then he said, "Thank you," to the star book, and the star book said, "Come back, I have a great many skies." And that was all, because it was a book of few words, and Harry loved it the more for it. It was on his way back from the star book's alcove that same visit that he passed the low, dark door again. He had truly forgotten it, but there it was at the far end of the corridor where the shelves gave way. Low and old and shut, its wood almost black, banded with iron gone the color of a bruise, and something about it made the corridor quieter as he neared it, the chattering books falling still one by one the closer he came. There was no handle, there was no keyhole. There was only, carved into the center of it, a single shape, and Harry, who could read the wall writing a little now, bent close to make it out, and felt the cold coming off the wood against his cheek. It was not the gentle opening word. It was almost that shape, the sleeping snake loop he loved, but wrong, turned back the other way, closed instead of open, and looking at it made the hair rise on Harry's arms the way the star sky had made him forget to breathe, except that this was the opposite feeling. This was the opposite feeling of standing at the top of the cellar stairs in the dark and being certain, without any reason, that you should not go down. He reached out to touch the shape. "Not that one," said the library. It did not shout. It never shouted. But there was a weight in the two words that stopped Harry's hand a finger's breadth from the wood. and he pulled it back, and the corridor let out a small collective breath, hundreds of books exhaling at once. "What's behind it?" Harry asked. His voice came out smaller than he meant it to. "Something I keep shut," said the library, and it did not say more, and Harry heard plainly that it would not, and that the not saying was itself a kind of protecting. The way a parent stands between a child and a thing without explaining why, because the explaining would frighten worse than the standing. "When you are older," said the library, "and stronger and know a great deal more than you do now, I will tell you, not before. Do you trust me?" And Harry, who had trusted almost no one in his short life and been proven right to withhold it, looked at the black door with its backward shape and then away from it, up at the shelves full of voices that shouted his name with joy, and he said, "Yes." "Good," said the library, and there was relief in it, and love, and something else, something old and sad and careful that Harry did not have a name for and would not, for years. "Then come away. The stars are better company tonight." And Harry came away and did not look back at the door, and behind him it sat in its shadow, shut, patient, the backward shape breathing cold into the dark, keeping whatever it kept. Harry learned quickly. Everyone would say so, later, the ones who did not know why. But the truth of it, the secret of it, was not that he was quick. It was that he was hungry, and that at last, after all those years, the hunger was being fed, and a hungry child fed at last will eat fast, in case the food is taken away. Because in his experience, it always had been. He read, over that year, his 6th year, he read more than most people read in a decade. He read the Green Beast book cover to cover and started it again. He read the grandfather book stories until he knew them well enough to catch it when it changed to detail, which it did sometimes, to see if he was listening, and crowed with delight when he caught it. He read a slim silver book about the courtesy owed to a river, which turned out to be mostly about listening, and a fat purple one about herbs that made his fingers smell of crushed green for a day after, and a book so old its voice was almost gone, a whisper he had to bend his ear to the page to hear, which told him the names of the winds and cried, dry and rustling, when he learned them because no one had said the names of the winds aloud in 1,000 years, and a wind whose name is never said begins, slowly, to forget itself. The whisper book of winds became, of all of them, the one he was gentlest with. Because it was the frailest, and because its grief had frightened him. He had learned early to be careful of frail and grieving things. He had a great deal of practice being one, so he went back to it often, and each time he bent his ear to its nearly voiceless pages and let it name a wind for him. And each time, as he learned a name, the wind it belonged to seemed to wake somewhere far off and blow, faintly, through the corridor, stirring the pages of the other books, and they did not complain, because they understood. There was a wind that came before rain, and a wind that came after. A wind that lived only high in the mountains and had not touched a human face in centuries. A small mischievous wind that turned pages and stole hats and meant no harm. A great slow wind that turned pages and stole hats and meant no harm. A great slow wind that pushed the seasons around the world and had no hurry in it at all. Harry learned them, one by one, and each name he learned made the old book a little stronger, its whisper a little less faint, until one visit he came and found it could speak almost aloud again, and it wept once more, but differently. The dry, rustling weeping turned from grief to something nearer joy. Because a wind whose name is spoken remembers itself, and a book that has been read remembers what it is for. And Harry had given it both, and asked for nothing back but the names, which cost it nothing to give and gave it everything. And with each book, without ever sitting down to a lesson, he learned. Not just reading now. The books could not help teaching. It was what they were for. The Beast book taught him patience, the courtesy of the held-out finger. The River book taught him to listen, really listen, under the surface of a thing, which turned out later to be half of all magic. The Wind book taught him names, and that names had power, that to call a thing rightly by its true name was to have a kind of gentle claim on it. He did not know he was building a foundation. He thought he was just reading, just visiting friends, just being, at last, somewhere he was wanted. But the library knew. The library was laying the stones one at a time, so carefully, so slowly, in an order chosen with 1,000 years of patience, and it never once let him see the shape of the wall it was building, because a child who sees the wall stops enjoying the stones. Only once did the deeper things show through. He had been reading later than usual, and he had come to the end of a chapter in the grandfather book, and he had said, half asleep, half to himself, the words he read, and the words had been an old blessing, a thing you said to send a traveler safely off. And as he said them, tired and unthinking and warm, the light he always carried in his hand had risen up of its own accord and hung above his palm, and shaped itself, briefly, into the form of a small bird, gold and glowing, which beat its wings, twice, and then came art and carded that sank. Harry sat very still. He had not drawn a shape. He had not made the loop or any of the other few shapes the library had let him learn. He had only read old words aloud, meaning them, and the magic had answered. "Ah," said the library, and there was something careful in it. "So you have found that out." "Did I do that?" Harry whispered. I didn't make it. "It just came. You made it," said the library, "but not with your hands. With the words and the meaning under the words. And Harry, that is a rarer thing than the shapes and an older one, and I did not think you would find it so soon. And then gently, before the pride could swell in him too far, it is also more dangerous. The shapes ask before they open. Words spoken with meaning do not always ask. They simply do. So we will be careful with it. We will be very careful with it. And here, the library did a thing it rarely did, which was to let him hear, plainly, that it was pleased and afraid at once. The two feelings braided together the way they are in anyone who loves a child and sees the child grow strong. But it is a good thing to have found. It means you were listening, truly listening, with the meaning and not just the sound. Not everyone can. Not even everyone who lived here in the old days could. And Harry heard, under the words, the shape of the thing the library did not say, that he was, perhaps, something the old days had not often made. And that this was a gift and a weight, both the way everything worth having is. The daylight world did not know what to make of him. Mrs. Prowett knew something had changed, though she could not have said what. The strange thin Potter boy who had spent his first week staring at the alphabet freeze the way you stare at writing in a language only you cannot read, now sat at the back of her class getting his sums deliberately, carefully wrong, and it was the carefulness that troubled her. A child who cannot do a sum gets it wrong in the ordinary scattered way. This one got it wrong the way a person lies, consistently, plausibly, with just enough error to be believed. Once, marking his book, she had found under a wrong answer, half rubbed out, the right one, worked through in a hand far too neat and far too advanced for 6 years old, and she had sat looking at it for a while, and then she had said nothing, and sent no note home. Because the last note home had earned him a week of coming to school without any lunch, and she was not a foolish woman. At home, it was worse, and it was better. Worse, because the Dursleys had begun, dimly, to sense that the child in the cupboard was not as cowed as he had once been. He still flinched when Uncle Vernon's voice rose. He had not lost his sense, but there was a stillness in him now, a place inside him that the shouting did not reach, and Aunt Petunia, who had spent years enjoying the sight of him made small, found less and less to enjoy, and did not understand why, and the not understanding made her sharper. Better, because the cupboard was no longer a punishment. They did not know that. They still sent him there thinking it a cruelty, and he went with his head down, playing the part, and the moment the latch dropped he was gone, hand on the wall, loop in the air, into the gold. And Dudley could have his second dinner and his tantrums and his friends. Harry had a corridor of 1,000 voices that shouted his name with joy. He never told them. Not once did the temptation so much as brush him, to say something, to hint, to hold over their heads the enormous secret that the freak in the cupboard walked in halls older than England. Partly this was sense. He knew a secret shared with the Dursleys was a secret ended. But partly, it was something the library had put in him without ever naming it. That the best things do not need to be shown to be real. That a wonder does not become truer for being envied, and that a person who carries something gold inside him need not make anyone else look at it to know that it is there. So he carried it, and the carrying changed his face, a little, though he could not see it and no one who might have loved him was there to notice. The pinched, watchful look of a hunted child eased, at the edges, into something steadier, the look of a person who has, somewhere, a door that only he can open, and a friend on the other side of it who would wait 1,000 more years if he asked. He went home that night with the bird of gold beating its wings behind his eyes whenever he closed them, and he did not tell anyone, because there was no one to tell, and because some wonders are better held than spoken. He lay in the cupboard and listened to the house creak and settle, Uncle Vernon's snores coming through the ceiling, Dudley's second dinner still sitting heavy somewhere above, and none of it could reach him, none of it could touch the warm gold place inside him where the library had built, stone by patient stone, the beginnings of a person the Dursleys would never meet. Read me, the books had cried when he first crawled in. Read me, it has been so long. He would. He had promised, and he was a child who kept his promises. Having learned exactly how it felt to have promises broken, he would read them all, or as many as one life allowed. And he would carry their names and their winds and their beasts and their courtesies up into the daylight world where no one would ever guess what the strange, quiet boy in the two big clothes carried folded up inside him. Patient, growing, gold. The low, dark door at the end of the corridor he had forgotten entirely. It had not forgotten him. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The Warden of Broken Things. The glasses broke on a Thursday, and it was not Harry's fault, which made no difference at all. He was 7 now, and he had needed glasses for a year. Cheap round ones from the chemist that the Dursleys had bought only because a school nurse had written a letter with the word negligence in it, and which they resented buying, and which Harry had learned to guard as he guarded everything he was given, because the giving was rare and the taking away was not. Dudley's gang had cornered him behind the science block. There had been the usual shoving, the usual chant, and then a fist that was aimed at his shoulder had caught his face instead, and the glasses had leapt off his nose and skittered across the tarmac, and Dudley, delighted, had brought his enormous trainer down on them, once, deliberately, grinding. Harry had picked up the pieces afterward, on his knees, alone. One lens was cracked clean across. The frame was snapped at the bridge and bent at one arm. He had held the broken thing in his cupped hands all the way home, as he had once held the apple, except that this was the opposite of the apple. This was the opposite of the apple. This was a thing ruined instead of given, and he knew exactly what would happen when he showed it, that it would somehow be his fault, that there would be no money for new ones, that he would go back to squinting at a blurred world for months, and that so he did not show it. He put the broken glasses in his pocket and squinted through the afternoon, and when the latch dropped that night, he put his hand on the wall and drew the loop and went down into the gold. And the first thing he did, sitting on the warm stone with the tree of books turning overhead, was take the ruined glasses out of his pocket and hold them up and say, in a voice that came out thicker than he wanted it to, "Can you fix these?" The library was quiet a moment. "Show me," it said. And Harry held them higher into the gold light, the cracked lens and the snapped bridge and the bent arm, his whole squinting world broken in his two hands. And the library looked at them, in whatever way it looked at things, and then it did a thing it had not done in 3 years of visits. It did not answer. It moved him. The floor beneath Harry did not shift, exactly, and yet when he looked up from the glasses the tree was gone and the round clearing was gone, and he was standing. He had not stood. He had been sitting in the mouth of a hall he had never seen, and the change had happened between one blink and the next, as gently and completely as a scene changes in a dream. He had learned by now that the library could do this, could fold its own halls together like a person folding a map, so that a place a mile of walking away could be a step away when it chose. It did it rarely. It did it, he understood, when something mattered. "Where are we?" he asked. "Somewhere I do not often bring anyone," said the library. "Go in." Slowly. "And Harry, do not be afraid of what you find here. It has been asleep a long time, and it does not mean you any harm, whatever your eyes tell you when it wakes." That was not, Harry thought, a very comforting thing to be told, but he had trusted the library with a black door and been kept safe. So he went in, slowly, his broken glasses still cupped in his hands. The hall was round and vast, and unlike any other part of the library he had seen, there were no shelves here. The walls curved up smooth and paled to a dome so high it was lost in shadow, and set into the walls, all the way round, were niches, hundreds of them, and in each niche rested a thing that had once been broken and had been made whole. Harry saw this slowly, as his eyes, weak as they were, without the glasses adjusted to the dimmer light. A cup, in one niche, its many cracks filled with lines of gold so that it looked more beautiful mended than it could ever have looked new. A sword in another snapped in two and rejoined the join a seam of silver light. A child's wooden horse, one leg once broken off and now grown back, the new wood a shade paler than the old, like a scar. A harp with restrung strings. A window, a whole leaded window standing free in its niche, that had been smashed and was now reassembled, and through its colored glass, a light shone that came from no lamp Harry could find. It was a hall of healed things, and the healing had not hidden the hurt. Every mended object in every niche wore its mending openly. The gold in the cracks, the silver in the seam, the pale new wood, like whoever had done this work believed that a thing which had been broken and made whole was not lesser for the breaking but greater, that the mend was a part of the beauty and not a shameful thing to be concealed. Harry turned slowly in the center of the hall, looking, and something in his chest hurt, and it was not a bad hurt. He thought of his own scars, the thin white line on his knee, the older marks he did not like to look at, the crooked way one of his fingers had healed after a door in a temper. He had always understood those to be ugly, to be proof that he was a thing that got broken. And here was a whole hall built on the opposite idea, and he did not have words for what it did to him to stand in it. At the far side of the hall, larger than any niche, there was a raised stone floor, and on the raised floor there was a shape. And the shape was so large and so still that Harry had taken it, at first, for a part of the architecture. Now he looked at it properly, and his squinting eyes made it out, and everything in him went still. It was a lion. Or it was almost a lion. It was carved of pale gold stone, and it was the size of a small house, lying with its great paws stretched out before it and its head resting on its paws, asleep, and from its shoulders rose two folded wings of the same stone, feather over carved feather, and it was so beautifully made that Harry could see the individual hairs of its mane and the veins in the closed lids of its enormous eyes. Without any question, waking up. Thingy was one ears weaking because the stone was changing. It began at the paws and moved inward, a warmth, a color, the dead gray gold of stone flushing slowly to the living gold of a thing with blood in it, and the great sides began, very slowly, to rise and fall, with breath, and the closed eyes moved beneath their lids the way a person's eyes move, in Riddit 9. Harry stood rooted to the pale floor within gas, and did not run it. The lion opened its eyes. They were gold, of course. Gold with a pupil like a cat's, a vertical slot of black, and they were old, older even than the grandfather book's voice, older than the star book's furthest sky, and they found Harry at once, standing small and squinting in the middle of the great round hall, and they looked at him, and Harry looked back, because he did not know what else to do. And for a long moment, the winged stone lion and the 7-year-old boy simply regarded one another across the hall of healed things. Then the lion spoke, and its voice was not a roar, which was what Harry had braced for. It was low and slow, and it seemed to come up through the floor and through the soles of Harry's feet as much as through his ears, and it was, underneath its enormousness, unmistakably kind. "How long," said the lion, "have I slept?" Harry opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He had read 100 books that talked, but he had never spoken to anything so large. "A long time," said the library, and it said it aloud so that Harry could hear both sides of the conversation, and its almost voice sounded different spoken into that great hall, fuller, sadder. "A very long time, Warden. I am sorry to have let you sleep so long. There was no one to wake for." The lion's gold eyes did not leave Harry. "And now there is. The great head lifted from the great paws, and the lion looked at Harry the way Harry had sometimes seen very old people look at very young ones, with a kind of ache in it, a looking through the child at all the years the child did not know were coming. "Come here, little one," it said. "Let me see what has come to wake me after so long a sleep. And do not be afraid. I have never in all my years harmed a child, and I do not mean to start with one who has plainly been harmed enough." Harry crossed the hall. His bare feet made no sound on the pale stone. He came to the edge of the raised floor and stopped, his head tipped all the way back to look up at the vast gold face, and the lion lowered its head until one great gold eye was level with him, close enough that Harry could see himself reflected in it. Tiny and dark, a small boy holding a broken thing. "You have brought me something," said the lion. Harry looked down at the glasses in his hands. He had forgotten them. He held them up. "They're broke," he said. And his voice cracked on it, humiliatingly, the way it did when he was trying not to mind about something he minded about very much. "They stepped on them. I can't see right without them, and there won't be new ones, and I thought maybe—" He stopped. He did not know how to finish it without saying the thing underneath, which was, "Please," which was, "I have so little, and they broke one of the few things I have, and I cannot bear it." The lion was quiet a moment. Then it said, "Set them down, there, on the stone between us." Harry knelt and set the broken glasses down on the pale stone. "Now," said the lion, "I could mend them for you. It would take me less time than it takes you to blink, and you would have your glasses whole, and you would go home, and that would be a kindness, and a small one." The gold eye regarded him. "Or I could teach you to mend them yourself. That would take a great deal longer, and it would be hard, and you would fail many times before you succeeded, and it would be a greater kindness, and you would carry it the rest of your life. Which do you want?" Harry looked at the broken glasses. He was 7, and he was tired, and he wanted his glasses fixed, and the first way was right there, less than a blink. But he looked up at the great gold face, and he understood that he was being asked a real question, that the lion truly would do either, and that the question was not really about the glasses at all. "Teach me," he said. The whole hall seemed to warm. In the niches around the walls, the mended things, the gold-seamed cup, the silver-jointed sword, the scarred wooden horse seemed to glow a little brighter, like they approved. "Ah," said the lion, and there was satisfaction in it, deep and slow, like a great cat settling. "Then we begin. I am the warden of this hall, little one, and mending is the discipline I keep. And it is the oldest and the gentlest of all the disciplines, and the most forgotten, because the world would always rather learn to break things than to make them whole. What is your name?" "Harry." "Then listen closely, Harry, for the first thing about mending is the hardest, and everything else follows from it, and it is this." The lion's voice dropped lower still, so that Harry felt it in his bones. "You cannot mend a thing until you have truly understood how it was broken. Not roughly. Not nearly. Truly. You must know the break better than you know anything. Know it the way the thing itself knew it, in the moment it happened. Most who try to mend fail here, because to understand a break truly, you must be willing to feel it, and feeling it hurts, and people would rather patch over a hurt than feel their way to the bottom of it. Do you understand?" Harry looked at the glasses. He thought he did understand, a little though, not in the way the lion meant. He knew all about patching over hurts rather than feeling to the bottom of them. He had a lifetime of practice. "I think so," he said. "Good," said the warden. "Then pick them up and close your eyes, and I will show you how to listen to a broken thing." Learning to mend was the hardest thing Harry had ever done, and it took him the better part of a year, and it changed him more than anything before it. The warden did not teach the way the books taught. The books taught by the light, by drawing you in, by making you want to know. The warden taught by patience so vast it was almost frightening, the patience of a thing that had slept 1,000 years and reckoned time in ages, and it would make Harry do a thing over and over and over, not scolding, never satisfied with less than the true thing, and Harry, who had learned in the house to do things just well enough, not to be hit and no better, learned in the warden's hall to do a thing until it was right for its own sake, which was a different skill entirely and a rare one. The first weeks he did not touch the glasses at all. The warden made him mend other things first, small things. Practice breaks, and it began with a clay cup. The warden broke the cup itself, one enormous claw touching it so that it fell into 3 clean pieces, and then it said, "Now, do not think about fixing it. Think about how it broke. Hold the pieces. Feel where the clay pulled apart. Feel the line the break wanted to take, because a thing breaks along the lines of its own making. Always, if you know how to feel for them. Do not push your idea of whole onto it. Ask it how it wishes to be whole again. This made no sense to Harry for a long time. He would hold the 3 pieces of clay and press them together and try to make the light come, the mending light, and nothing would happen, or worse, something would happen wrong. The clay fusing lumpen and ugly, the cracks sealed but the shape ruined, and the warden would say, gently, "You pushed. You told it what whole should be instead of asking." Again and break it once more, and Harry would try again. He failed for weeks. He grew frustrated, the old hot frustration, and once he threw the pieces of clay across the hall and they shattered against the far wall, and he shattered against the far wall, and he sat with his knees up and his face hidden, waiting for the anger to come down on him, waiting for the shouting, the way it always came in the house when he failed at something. It did not come. The warden simply waited, the way the library always waited, and after a while it said quietly, "You are angry because you failed." "I keep failing," Harry said into his knees. "Yes, you said I would." "Yes, and you have. And you will fail more." "Do you know why I make you fail so much, Harry, when I could mend 1,000 cups in the time you take to ruin one?" Harry did not answer. The warden's voice came slow and warm across the hall. "Because a person who has never failed cannot mend anything. To mend is to have understood a break, and to understand a break, you must have known breaking, and a person who has only ever succeeded knows nothing of it at all. You, Harry." And here the great voice grew very gentle. "You know a great deal about breaking, more than a child should. I am sorry for it. But it is the truest thing you own, and it is why you will be, one day, a mender such as this hall has not seen in an age. Now, come and pick up the pieces you threw. They are not ruined. Nothing here is ever ruined. That is the first thing this hall means." Harry lifted his face from his knees. Across the hall, the pieces of clay he had thrown lay scattered against the wall, and as he watched, the mended things in the niches glowed, softly, all of them. And he understood the lesson in his body before he understood it in his head, that broken did not mean ruined. That a thing thrown against a wall in anger could still be gathered up and made whole. That this was true of clay cups, and it was true, though he could not yet think it in words, of boys. He got up, he gathered the pieces. He tried again. The warden varied the breaks so that he would not learn one break by heart and mistake it for understanding. It broke a cup along its length and made him mend that. Then it broke one into a dozen small pieces, a hard, mean break with no clean lines, and made him mend that, and this took him a week by itself, because a break with no clean lines is a break that has forgotten its own shape. And to mend it, Harry had to help it remember, piece by patient, holding each shard against the next until it found where it belonged. Once the warden gave him 2 cups broken together, their pieces mixed, and said nothing, and let him work half the night sorting one cup from the other by feel alone, before it told him, gently, that the pieces knew their own kin, that if he stopped trying to sort them with his eyes and let each shard lean toward the shard it had once been joined to, they would sort themselves. And they did. He held a double handful of mixed shards loose in his cupped palms and let them settle, and they stirred, faintly, each turning toward its own, and Harry watched 2 ruined cups quietly untangle themselves in his hands and understood a little more about how deeply things remember what they were. And one day, weeks later, months maybe, he held the 3 pieces of clay and he did not push, did not tell the cup what whole should be. Only held the pieces and felt, truly felt, the way the clay had pulled apart, felt it all the way to the bottom, which meant letting it hurt a little, letting the small hurt of the broken thing be real to him instead of patching over it, and the mending light came, not from his hand this time. From between his hands, from the place where the pieces wanted to rejoin, a warm gold seam of it running along the break exactly where the break had gone, and the clay drew itself together along that seam, and when the light faded, Harry was holding a whole cup, and along its side ran a thin line of gold where the crack had been. Not hidden, not smoothed away, but there, a part of it now, a scar made beautiful. He looked up at the warden with his mouth open. "There," said the lion, and its gold eyes were warm as summer. "Now you have mended something. Do you feel how it is different from the like you make with the shapes, or the words? The shapes command. The words invoke. But mending asks. It is the only magic that asks. That is why it is the gentlest, and why it is the most forgotten, because asking is harder than commanding, and slower, and the world is always in a hurry." The great head lowered until the gold eye was level with him again. "Keep the cup. Look at it when you doubt yourself. And now, Harry, now, I think, you are ready for your glasses." The glasses were harder than the cup, because Harry cared about them, and caring, the warden warned him, could push as surely as anger could. When you do not care, it said, it is easy to ask, easy to listen. But you want these mended so badly that your wanting will shout over the small voice of the break, and you will push, and you will fail. So before you try, you must set the wanting down. Not throw it away. You are allowed to want your glasses, but set it down beside you, where it cannot lean on your hands. This was the hardest lesson of all, harder than the clay, and Harry understood it went far beyond glasses. He sat cross-legged on the pale stone with the broken glasses in his cupped hands, the cracked lens, the snapped bridge, the bent arm, and he tried to set down the desperate wanting of a child who has too little and cannot bear to lose more, and it would not set down. It clung, and the first dozen times he tried the light came wrong or came not at all. And then the warden did a thing that Harry did not expect. It told him a story. It told him, slow and low, about the woman who had built this hall, the same woman with the warm, bready name, the founder, and how she had built the Hall of Mending first, before the great library, before anything, because she had lost someone, a child of her own, to a sickness no magic of that age could mend, and she had spent the rest of her long life learning and keeping every art of making whole that the world possessed, not because it could bring back what she had lost. It could not, but had not that by cat was. She understood, said the warden, that you cannot mend everything. Some breaks are past all asking. Her child was. Your parents were. And the greatest lesson of this hall, Harry, the one under all the others, is this. You mend what can be mended, gently, truly, with all your care. And you learn to carry, without breaking yourself, the things that cannot. Both. You must learn both. A mender who does not know what cannot be mended will spend his life pushing at graves. Harry sat very still. Your parents were. He had never thought of his parents as a thing that was broken. He had thought of them, when he thought of them at all, as an absence, a hole where other children had something. But the warden spoke of them as a break, a real thing that had truly happened, a loss with a shape. And somehow that was better. Somehow that was better. Somehow that let him hold it. The way the gold-seamed cup was better than a hole where a cup had been. Harry looked at the broken glasses. And Riri said, and he felt the break, all of it. The crack across the lens where the trainer had come down. The snap at the bridge, the bent arm, felt each one truly, to the bottom, let it be real. And the mending light came, gold, from between his hands, running along every break at once. And the wrong straightened, and when the light faded, Harry was minded, veined with light, more beautiful for having been broken. He put them on. The world snapped into focus, sharp and clear and gold-edged, and he looked up at the warden through lenses seamed with his own first true mending. And the warden looked back at him. And neither of them said anything for a while, because there was nothing that needed saying. For a while, because there was nothing that needed saying. After that, the warden let him walk the hall. It had not before. In the weeks of the clay cup, it had kept him on the raised floor, close, working, and Harry had glimpsed the niches only from a distance, the gold-seamed cup, the silver-jointed sword, the scarred wooden horse. Now the warden said, go and look at them properly. You have earned it. Every mended thing in this hall has a story, and a mender should know that things are more than the sum of their breaks. Ask any of them. They remember. So Harry walked the great curved wall slowly from niche to niche, and the mended things told him, in voices small and faint as the memory of voices, what they had been. The gold-seamed cup had belonged to a healer who carried water to the sick, and it had been dropped and shattered on a stone floor by a child too weak with fever to hold it, and the healer had wept. Not for the cup, but for the child, and had mended it that same night so that she might carry water in it again the very next morning, and the child had lived and drunk from the gold-seamed cup for 80 years after, and had it mended twice more in that long life, and each mended twice more in that long of gold. So the cup Harried held them a pie. Harry set it back in its niche very gently. The silver-jointed sword had been broken on purpose, its owner told him in a voice like a bell cracked and rung again. Its owner had been a fighter in an age of fighting and had grown sick of the breaking of things, and had brought the sword here and asked the warden to help him break it, and then to mend it, and to hang it in this hall not as a weapon but as a promise, a thing that had been made to harm and was now kept whole and idle forever, so that it might remember and its keeper might be turned to peace and held there. Harry looked at the seam of silver light down its blade for a long time, and the scarred wooden horse, the little horse with a paler leg, had belonged to no one grand at all. It had belonged to an ordinary child, in an ordinary house, a child with magic in them and no one to teach it. One of the lonely gifted ones the founder had built the whole library to save, and that child had come here first with nothing but a broken toy and a broken heart, and the founder herself had knelt with them and taught them, on that one small horse, the first mending they ever did. I was her first pupil's first work, said the little horse proudly in a voice like a child's, before the great halls, before the beasts and the stars. There was just her, and a lonely one like you, and me, broken, on a table. She said mending was where everyone should begin. She said if you can make a broken thing whole, you will never be afraid of the world again. Because the world's worst threat is that it breaks things, and you will know that broken is not, and had wept the whole time she did, and had then hung it in this hall and never played it, because he could not bear to, and had come only to look at it sometimes, the gold seam down its neck, for the rest of his life. He said the mend was the truest thing in it, the harp told Harry softly. He said a whole harp would have been a lie. that she was gone and the world was broken where she had been, and a mended thing that showed its break was the only honest music left to him. The harp was quiet a moment. "Play me, if you like." Just one note. No one has, in an age. Harry reached out and touched a single string, and it rang, and the note was so pure, and so sad, and so unbearably alive, that he had to sit down, and the note hung in the round hall a long time before it faded, and Harry understood, better than any lesson had taught him, that mending was not about making things like the hurt had never happened. It was about honoring the hurt by making something whole around it that could still, after everything, make music. Harry stood before the little scarred horse for a long time, and something in him settled that had been unsettled his whole life. He had begun here too. Not with the great magics, the shapes and the words and the light. With a broken thing on a stone floor, and a plea to make it whole. He was one of them now. One of the long line of lonely gifted children the founder had reached across 1,000 years to catch. And he was not afraid as he had been afraid. And he understood at last why the library had moved him here, to this hall, when he came in cupping his broken glasses like a wound. It had not been about the glasses. It had never been about the glasses. The glasses nearly undid him. He had not thought it through, in his joy at having them whole. He had put them on in the library and worn them home without once considering that Aunt Petunia had seen them broken Dudley, had come home crowing about it, about the freak specks under his shoe, and she had been pleased, in her thin way, at one more thing gone wrong for the child she despised. And now here was the child at breakfast wearing whole glasses, glasses that caught the kitchen light along faint gold lines at the bridge and the arm. And Aunt Petunia's eyes went to them and narrowed, and Harry felt the danger as he always felt it, a cold prickle down the back of the neck, older and surer than any magic. "Those are mended," she said. Harry did not look up from his toast. He had learned in 8 years of this, that meeting her eyes made things worse, that a boy who looked frightened was a boy worth frightened. He kept his voice flat and dull, the daylight voice, the voice that gave nothing. "The man at the shop did them. When I walked past, he felt sorry." It was a thin lie and he knew it, but he had chosen it carefully in the half-second he had, because it was a lie that cost her nothing to believe and cost her something to disprove. She would have had to care enough to ring the shop, and caring about Harry, even to catch him out, was more attention than she liked to spend. Her mouth thinned, her eyes went over the glasses once more, over the faint gold veining she could not quite explain and did not want to, because things she could not explain about the child were the things she liked least of all. The freakish things, the things that reminded her of her sister. She looked away. "Don't expect it twice," she said, which meant she had decided to believe him, or to pretend to, which came to the same thing. Under the table, Harry unclenched his hand. It had been curled around the leg of his chair, and when he opened it there was the faintest gold glow fading from his palm. The mending light, risen unbidden the way it did now when he was afraid, because his body had learned that the answer to a broken moment was to make it whole. He pressed the hand flat on his knee until the glow died. That had been close. If she had seen that, if she had seen the light, he did not let himself finish the thought, but it taught him something, that morning, that the warden could not have taught him in the round hall, and the library said as much that night. "You are learning to carry two worlds," it said, "the gold one and the gray one, and you must never let the one see the other. And that is a hard thing to ask of a child, and I am sorry to ask it, but you did well this morning. You did not push, even afraid. You gave her a true enough thing, and let her keep her comfort. Mending is not only for cups, Harry. Sometimes the thing you mend is a moment, before it can break into something worse." And Harry, who had thought of his daylight cleverness as a separate and lesser skill, a thing of mere survival, understood for the first time that it was of a piece with everything the halls had taught him. That the flat voice and the true enough lie and the unclenched hand were their own quiet discipline, the mending of dangerous moments, and that he was better at it than almost anyone, because he had been practicing it alone since before he could read. He mended other things in the gray world after that, small and secret. The chip in Aunt Petunia's figurine as he had done before. The frayed strap of his own school bag so it would not fail him. Once, greatly daring, the cracked spine of a library book at school. The real library. The small dusty room with the one tired librarian because he could not bear to see a book in pain now that he knew books could feel it. And the librarian had found it whole the next morning and turned it over in her hands and looked around the empty room like someone might explain it, and no one did. And Harry, at the back with a book open in front of his face, had smiled where she could not see. The one lesson the warden would not teach him was the one Harry wanted most, and it came this spring. He was nearly 8, and it came because of a bird. He found it in the Dursleys' garden, under the hedge, a young blackbird that had fallen or been caught by a cat and got away, and it was alive, but barely. One wing bent all wrong and its small chest going far too fast, and Harry, who now knew how to make broken things whole, felt the certainty rise in him bright and total. He could fix this. He cupped the bird in his 2 hands as he had cupped the glasses, as he had cupped the apple a lifetime ago, and he waited until the latch dropped that night and he carried it down into the gold, running, actually running through the halls, calling for the warden. and the library folded the way to the round hall short for him because it heard the fear in his voice. "Fix it," Harry said, kneeling on the pale stone, holding the bird up to the great gold face. "Please. It's hurt. Its wing. I can feel the break. I can feel the drake. Teach me. Tell me the shape. Please, it's dying." "Harry," said the warden. "It's dying, please. Harry." The great voice was very gentle, and it stopped him the way gentleness stopped him when shouting never could. "Set it down. Softly. There. Now listen to me, because this is the hardest thing this hall has to teach, and I am sorry that you must learn it tonight with a life in your hands. But that is often how it must be learned." Harry set the bird down on the pale stone, cupping his hands around it against the cold, and looked up, and his eyes were bright and wet behind his gold-seamed glasses. "You can feel the break in its wing," said the warden. "Yes, you could mend the wing. The bone would knit. But a living thing is not a cup, Harry. A living thing is not a break in a bone. It is the whole of itself, all at once, its heart and its breath, and the frightened small fire of its life, and that fire is not a thing you can ask back once it goes. Mending asks. You have learned that. It asks the pieces how they wish to be whole. But death does not answer, little one. It is the one break in all the world that will not answer the asking, and if you push at it and you will want to so badly, you will push a part of yourself into that silence, and you will not get it back whole. The warden's eyes held his. This is the boundary. This is where the founder's own child was lost, and where she learned that not everything can be mended, and it is the truest and hardest law of this whole hall. You may mend the wing. If the fire stays, the wing will hold, but you cannot mend the fire. No one can. Not the founder, not the first wizards, not I. Do you understand? Harry looked down at the small bird in the cup of his hands. Its chest was still going. Fast, too fast. So I just let it. You do what a mender does, said the warden. You mend what can be mended with all your care, and you carry the rest. Mend the wing. Give it what you can give. And then hold it, and be with it, so that whatever happens, it does not happen alone. That is not nothing, Harry. To not be alone at the end is not nothing. It may be the greatest mending there is, and it is the one that asks the most of the mender, because it cannot be finished, only given. So Harry mended the wing. He set the wanting down, the fierce, wanting to save it, the hardest wanting he had ever set down, and he listened to the break in the small bone, truly, to the bottom, and the gold light came, thin and careful, and the bone knit, a hair of gold along the little wing. And then he did the harder thing. He cupped the bird against his chest, over the middle of himself, over the place where his own fire lived, and he held it, and he did not push at the fast small chest or the failing fire. He only stayed and was with it. Warm hands around a warm small life, and the library dimmed its gold light low and soft, and the library dimmed its gold light low and soft, and the warden lowered its great head near, and the small boy and the blackbird kept a vigil in the round hall of healed things. The bird lived. The beat, it should not have perhaps. The warden seemed almost surprised. But somewhere in the small hours the frantic chest slowed to a steadier beat, and the fire, which Harry had not pushed at, which he had only kept company, banked itself and held, and near what would have been morning up above the blackbird stirred in his hands and made a cross little sound and tried its mended wing, and it worked, and Harry laughed. A wet cracked laugh, and the warden made a sound Harry had never heard it make. A low rolling rumble that shook the floor, and Harry realized it was the great black-weight lamb. You held it well, said the warden, when the bird was strong enough to perch on Harry's finger and glare at them both with its bright, indignant eye. You did not push. That is why it lives, not because you saved it. You cannot save what wants to go, but because you gave it a warm place to decide to stay. Take it home. Let it go where you found it. And remember, Harry, it might not have lived. Most nights, it would not have. You must be able to hold the ones that go as steadily as you held this one. Can you? Harry looked at the bird on his finger, small and cross and alive. I don't know, he said honestly. Good, said the warden. Only a fool would say yes. But you will learn. It is the last thing this hall teaches, and the longest, and you have made a beginning tonight that most never make it all. Harry carried the blackbird up through the gold in the dark, and let it go under the hedge where he had found it. And it flew, mended wing and all, up into the gray surrey dawn, and Harry watched it go until it was a speck and then nothing. And then he crawled back into the cupboard before the house woke, and lay down and did not sleep, and did not need to. Because he had held a life in his hands all night, and it had chosen to stay. And there would need dap. He went back to the warden's hall many times, that year and after, and the discipline of mending sank into him deeper than any other, because it was the one that answered something broken in himself. He mended other things. He grew good at it, then very good. The warden, who reckoned time and ages, seemed almost startled by how fast he took to it. And once, when Harry had mended a shattered mirror so cleanly that the seams of gold made a pattern across it like frost on a window, the great line had gone quiet and then said, half to itself, the last child never came so far in this, never had the patience, never had the dim and imagines, and Harry, who had not forgotten the book's slip about the last one, kept it with the black door and the grandfather book's refusal and all the other places where the library's long sorrow showed through, and did not push, because the warden had taught him, better than anyone, that some things must be carried and not chased. But he wondered, lying in the cupboard at night with his gold-seamed glasses folded on his chest and the mending light warm in his memory. He wondered about the child who had come before him, the one the books were not supposed to mention, the one who had never had the patience for the warden's hall. What had happened to them? Why did the library grieve them and fear to speak of them and keep a black door shut with a backward shape? He did not know. He was 7, and there was a great deal he did not know, but he was learning, slowly, gently, truly, the way the warden had taught him to learn everything, and he understood that a question, like a brake, could be held and carried until the time came when it could be answered, and that pushing at it before then would only ruin the shape of the eventual truth. So he carried it, and he mended what he could. He mended its ship in one of Aunt Petunia's china figurines once, in the night, so quietly and so well that she never knew it had been broken, and he did it not for her, but for the practice and for the private joy of making a broken thing whole in a house that only ever broke things. He mended the spine of the green beast book, gently, with the warden watching approvingly, and the beast book was so overcome it could not speak for an hour and let 3 bow truckles out at once. He mended, though he did not know it, something in himself, one gold seam at a time, so that the pinched, hunted look eased a little further from his face, and the flinch came a little slower when Uncle Vernon's voice rose and the child who had once believed himself a thing that got broken began, very slowly, along the lines of his own making, to understand that he was a thing that could be made whole. The warden watched him grow, and one night, as Harry made ready to go home, the great lion said a thing it had not said before. "You will leave this place someday," it said. "Not soon, but someday. The world above will find a use for you, or you will find a use for it, and you will walk out into it carrying everything these halls have given you. And when you do, Harry, remember the discipline of this hall above all the others. The world will teach you 100 ways to break things. It teaches everyone. But you will know a thing almost no one knows. And art the world let die because it was too slow and too gentle and too hard. You will know how to make things whole. Do not let it teach you to forget." "I won't," said Harry. "No," said the warden, looking at him with its ancient gold eyes, out of a face that had seen the first wizards and outlived them all. "No, I do not think you will." And it lowered its great head, and Harry, on an impulse he did not examine, reached up and laid his hand flat against the warm gold stone of its brow, as he had once laid his hand against the wall of the cupboard, and the warden went very still under his touch, and something passed between the enormous ancient guardian and the mended boy that neither of them had words for, and neither of them needed any. Then Harry went home, up through the gold and the dark, into the cupboard. His glasses seemed with light folded on his chest, and behind him the warden of Broken Things watched him go, and did not sleep this time, because there was, at last, something to stay awake for. Chapter 3. End. Chapter 4. The deep-tongued Harry was 9 years old the night he read The Hole of a Wall. He had not meant to. He had come down after a bad day, a canning day, one of the rare ones, Uncle Vernon's belt for a broken plate that Dudley had thrown, and he had wanted only the quiet of the first hall and the turning of the tree's pages, and he had drifted along an aisle he thought he knew, trailing his fingers just above the spines as he did, and he had drifted along an aisle he thought he knew, trailing his fingers just above the spa of the stick, and he'd had glan or brag, and he read it, all of it, the whole long rope of it, top to bottom, without stopping, as he read the cereal boxes now, without effort, without sounding it out, the meaning simply arriving as his eyes moved. He had not noticed it happen. That was the strangest part. Somewhere in 5 years of visits, between the Beast Book and the Star Book and the Winds and the Mending, the wall writing had stopped being a wall of shapes and become, quietly, a language he knew, and he had crossed that border without any ceremony at all. The way you cross from being a child who is read to into a child who reads, not in a moment, but so gradually that you look up one day and find yourself already on the other side. He stood very still in the aisle. His finger stopped beneath the last line, and read it again to be sure. Reading the old tongue was not like reading English. He had noticed it before, in fragments, but now, taking in a whole wall at once, he felt the full strangeness of it. English words told you about a thing. They were labels you learned to attach. The old words did not tell about, they showed. Reading the carved word for river, Harry felt something move in him the way water moves, a cool sliding sense of going somewhere. Reading the word for grief, a little further down he felt his chest go heavy and still, briefly the way it went at the graves he had never visited. The words did not describe their meanings. They carried them, the way the Star Book carried real skies, and to read a wall of them was to feel 100 true things pass through you one after another, and it was exhausting, and it was the most alive Harry had ever felt while sitting still. It was a poem, or a prayer, or an instruction in the old tongue to three were not always different things. It spoke of the making of the world, of how in the first days there had been no words at all, only things, mute and separate and lonely, a sun that did not know it was the sun, and a sea that did not know it was the sun, and a sea that did not know it was the sea. And of how the first wise ones had learned, slowly, painfully, to name them, and how in the naming the things had woken, the sun learning it was the sun, and shining the brighter for knowing the sea. And it said at the end, in letters carved so deep they must have taken years, to know the true name of a thing is to be trusted with it. Speak no name you have not earned. This was not a metaphor. Harry knew that now, as he knew things in this place, in his body before his head. It was a warning, and it was a door, and it had been waiting on this wall for 1,000 years for someone who could read it to come and stand where he was standing. You read that, said the library, and there was something in the almost voice he had not heard before. Not surprise exactly. The library was rarely surprised. It was more like the held breath of a parent watching a child do, unprompted, a thing the parent has been waiting years to see whether they could do. It's about names, said Harry, about how naming things woke them up. He looked at the deep carved warning. Speak no name you have not earned. What does that mean? Earned, how? The library was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice had changed, gone deeper somehow, or older, drawing the words up from further down than usual. I think, it said, that it is time I showed you the oldest part of me. You are ready to read the old tongue. That is the key to the door I have kept shut the longest, not the black door. Do not think of the black door tonight, but another, older, deeper, that I could not open to you until you could read what is written over it, because to bring an unready reader into that hall would be like handing a lit torch to someone who cannot see the barn full of hay all around them. Come, and Harry, take nothing lightly in the place I am about to show you. Everything you have learned until now, the shapes, the mending, the reading, all of it was preparing you for this. This is the root. This is where magic itself was born, and the hall folded. The hall of the deep tongue was not gold. That was the first thing Harry noticed, and it unsettled him, because he had come to think of gold as the color of the library, the warm light that had fetched him through the wall at 4 and warmed every hall since. This hall was not gold. It was dark, a deep, soft dark like the inside of the Starbook, and it was enormous, so enormous that Harry could not find its edges, and it was not empty. It was full of words. They hung in the air. That was the only way he could think of it. All through the vast dark, at every height and distance, hung words, not written, not spoken, but somehow simply present, each one a shape of pale light suspended in the dark like the stars in the Starbook's sky, and each one, Harry understood as he looked, was a true name. He could feel them. He could feel the name of stone, heavy and patient and low, hanging near the floor, and the name of fire, quick and restless, flickering high up, and the name of water, and the name of wind, and the name of wind, and the name of green growing things, and thousands more, the true names of everything the first wizards had ever learned to wake, hanging here in the dark of the deepest hall, kept, remembered, alive. And they sang. Not loudly, not even quite in sound, but each name gave off a note, its own note, the note that was the truth of it, and all the notes together made a music so vast and so quiet that Harry had been hearing it for a full minute before he realized he was hearing anything at all. And when he did realize, when he understood that he was standing inside the actual court of the world, the sound every true thing made simply by being truly itself, he had to sit down on the dark floor because his legs would not hold him. Oh, he said. It was all he had. Now you understand, said the library very softly, so as not to disturb the music, why I could not bring you here at 4. Or 6. Or 8. This is the hall of the deep tongue, Harry. Every true name the first wizards ever learned is kept here. This is the oldest magic there is, older than the shapes, older even than the mending. The shapes ask the world to open. The mending asks the pieces how they wish to be whole. But the deep tongue does not ask. The deep tongue names. And to name a thing truly, by the name that is its own truth, is to be able to call it, and to call a thing is to have it come. And there is no greater power in all the world, and no more dangerous. And that is why the warning is carved so deep on the wall outside. Speak no name you have not earned. Harry sat on the dark floor with the music of the world going through him and looked up at the hanging names. Thousands of them, glowing softly, singing, and he said, How do you earn a name? You understand the thing, said the library. Truly all the way down, the way the warden taught you to understand a break, no deeper even than that. To earn the true name of fire, you must understand fire so completely that you could not misuse it, because you would feel its misuse as a wound in yourself. That is the safeguard the first ones built into the world, and it is a good one, and it is held for 1,000 years. A name cannot be stolen. It cannot be guessed. It can only be earned by understanding, and the understanding is so hard and so deep that by the time you have earned a name, you no longer wish to abuse it, and that is not an accident. That is the whole point. That is the most beautiful thing the first wizards ever did. They made power impossible to hold, until you had become the kind of person who could be trusted with it. Do you see? Harry saw. He saw it as he had seen the Hall of Healed Things, all at once, a truth arriving whole, that everything the library had done with him, the years of it, the patience, the beginning with the gentlest shape and the slowest discipline, was the same principle. Written small, it had never given him a power he had not become ready to hold. It had grown the person and the power together so that neither outran the other. "We have time," it had said when he was 4. "You are so small and we have so much time." He understood now that this had not been comfort. It had been method. The oldest and wisest method there was. "Will you teach me a name?" he asked. "One," said the library. "Tonight, the first one. The one the founder taught every pupil first, because it is the safest and the kindest, and because a person who has earned it has already become, a little, the kind of person who can be trusted with the rest." "Which one?" "The true name of light," said the library. "Come, it is over here. It has been waiting for you a very long time." Learning the name of light took Harry until he was 10. He had thought, walking into the hall of the deep tongue, that a name would be a word, a thing he could be told and then know. He was wrong, and the wrongness of it was the first and hardest lesson. The library led him to a place in the vast dark where a single name hung, larger than the others, or nearer, a shape of pale gold, light. Of course, it was gold. It was the name of light turning slowly on itself, and it said, "You cannot be told this name. No one can be told a true name. If I spoke it to you, you would hear a sound, and the sound would be empty because you would not have earned the meaning under it. And an empty name is worse than no name. It is a lie you tell the world about yourself. You must earn it. You must understand light so completely that the name arrives in you on its own, and when it does, you will know, and so will I, and so will everything that has ever been lit." So Harry set out to understand light. He thought he already did. He had carried the library's light in his hand since he was 4. He had made the shapes glow and the mending seams shine, and he had read by the light under his blankets 100 nights. But the library made him start over, all the way down, like he knew nothing. And in a way he did. It sent him to the jars first, the jars of sleeping light he had pressed his nose to as a small child, and it taught him to sit with them and truly watch, for hours, for whole visits, until he understood the difference between gold light and green and the deep near black blue, understood that they were not the same thing in different colors but different things entirely, that light was not one substance but a family of them, quick and cold, kind and fierce. It sent him to the star book, and made him lie under the turning sky and understand that the light of a star was old, that it had left the star before the founder was born and was only arriving now, that to look at the stars was to look at the past, and that light therefore was a kind of memory, a thing that carried the truth of its source across unimaginable distances and times. It made him understand fire, which he had feared since the house, since the stove and the belt buckle heated, and this was the hardest part, because to understand light you must understand fire, and Harry did not want to. The library did not force him. It never forced anything, but one visit it brought him, quietly, to a small hearth set into the wall of a hall he had not seen before, a plain stone hearth with a low fire in it, and it said only, "Sit with it. You need not do anything. Only sit and do not look away, and let it show you what it is." And Harry sat, further from the flames than he needed to, his knees drawn up, and he watched the fire, and for a long time all he felt was the old cold dread, the memory of heat used to hurt, the buckle, the stove, the small cruelties of a house that knew how much a burn frightened him. He nearly did, and then the fire did something. A knot in one of the logs caught and a blue flame licked up out of it, delicate as a flower, and it was almost shy, and Harry, watching it, forgot for a moment to be afraid, and in that moment of forgetting he saw the fire truly for the first time, saw that it was not a thing that wanted to hurt, that it wanted nothing, that it was only light being born, over and over, each flame a violent glad breath, giving itself away in brightness and asking in itself, in its truth, one of the most generous things in the world. It did not know it had ever been used to frighten a child. It only burned and gave and died and burned again. He sat closer. He had not decided to. He found himself closer. He held out his hands to the warmth as he had never in his life dared hold his hands to a flame, and the fire warmed them gently and did not burn, because he was not afraid of it now, and it had never wanted to hurt him. And the two facts turned out to be the same fact, slowly. Over that visit and the next, Harry came to understand fire not as a threat but as light being born, violently, gladly, the way everything alive is born, and his fear of it eased and something in him that had been clenched since he was very small let go, all at once, so that he sat before the little hearth with warm hands and wet eyes and laughed, quietly, at nothing, at everything, at a boy who had been afraid of fire and was not, any longer, afraid. There were failures too in the learning of light, and they taught him as much as the understanding did. Once, impatient, he was still a child, and even the best taught child is impatient. He had tried to reach for the name before he had earned it, tried to force the meaning as he now knew the last boy had forced his names, and the library had felt him do it and had not stopped him, had only let him try because some things must be learned by their failing, and the name had not come as a wound because Harry had not the anger to wound it with. but it had simply refused, slid away from him like a fish from a grasping hand, and left him with nothing but the empty sound of it, hollow and cold, a lie he had tried to tell the world about himself. He had felt the wrongness of the empty name in his mouth like ash. He had never tried to force anything again. That, the library told him after, was the most important failure of his whole education. A boy who has felt how wrong a forced name tastes will never mistake force for earning as long as he lives. And one night, in his 10th year, sitting in the dark of the hall of the deep tongue beneath the slowly turning name of light, having understood at last, not with his head, with the whole of himself, all the way to the bottom what light was, where it came from, what it cost, what it gave, why it was the first gift and the kindest, the name arrived in him. He did not hear it. That was not how it came. It rose up from inside him, from the place where the warm feeling had always lived, the place the library had folded a little of its light into when he was 4, and it filled him, and it was not a sound, it was a knowing, and it was so large and so simple and so obviously achingly true that Harry began to cry, sitting there in the dark, not from sadness, from the sheer rightness of it, the way you might cry at a piece of music that says the thing you have never been able to say. "I know it," he whispered. "I know its name." "I know you do," said the library, and its almost voice was thick. And Harry understood that the library too was moved past speaking. "Then say it, Harry," softly, "and see what light does when it is called by one who has earned the calling." Harry opened his mouth, and he did not speak English, and he did not speak the wall tongue he had learned to read. He spoke the name of light, the true one, the one that had arrived in him, and it came out of him not as a word but as a thing, a shape of sound that was also a shape of meaning, and the moment it left him the whole hall of the deep tongue answered. Every hanging name flared. The name of light nearest him blazed like a small sun and then gentled, and all through the vast dark the thousands of other names brightened in reply, a wave of light rolling out from where Harry sat, name calling to name, the sun name and the fire name and the star name and the names he did not know, all of them answering the true speaking of a name earned honestly, and the music of the hall swelled from a whisper to a chord that Harry felt in his teeth and his bones and the roots of his hair. The whole first line get it spiken. "Et vat fieth thee, it in hets bebauedest, by the bebai." And in Harry's cupped hands, unbidden, light gathered, not the light he had learned to make with the shapes, the clumsy commanded glow, but light that came because he had called it by its name and it had chosen to come, and it was different, it was alive. It turned in his palms like a living creature, gold and warm and glad, and Harry looked down at it through eyes still wet and understood that he was holding, in his 2 hands, at 10 years old, in a buried hall under a house in Surrey, and he had not taken it, he had not taken it, he had earned it, and it had come to him gladly. And that made all the difference in the world. It was after that, when the light had gentled and sunk back into the dark and Harry sat spent and glowing-eyed on the floor of the hall, that the library told him, at last, some of what it had kept. "You have earned a name tonight," it said. "And there is an old courtesy among those who could do what you have just done, that when a pupil earns their first name, they are told the truth of their teacher. It is only fair. You have given me your trust for 6 years without asking what I keep behind the doors you cannot open. Ask now. I will answer what I can." Harry was quiet a while. There was so much he had wondered. But he found, when the moment came, that only one question mattered, and it was the oldest one, the one the books had slipped and hushed over when he was 5. "Who was the last one?" he said, "before me? Who came here before me?" The library was silent for so long that Harry thought it might not answer after all. When it did, the almost voice was low and careful and full of an old grief that Harry recognized, because he had learned to recognize grief as he had learned to recognize danger, from long acquaintance. "A boy," it said, "like you. Long ago, now longer than you would think. For time runs strangely for me, and I have kept myself sleeping through the empty centuries. There was a boy who could open the door, as you can, because the blood of the first ones ran in him too, thin but true. He found me the way you found me, lonely and gifted and unwanted and hungry to know. And I loved him, Harry, the way I love you, because that is what I am for, and I taught him as I am teaching you. What happened to him?" "I was not patient enough," said the library, and the words came out of it like something being set down that had been carried a very long way. "Or he was not, and I did not slow him as I should have. He was cleverer than you, in the quick way, though not the deep way. And he was angrier than you, because the world had used him worse, and I let his cleverness outrun his understanding. I taught him the shapes before he had learned to be gentle. I taught him names before he had earned them, because he begged, and because I was lonely too. And a lonely teacher is a dangerous one. Harry, remember that a teacher who needs the pupil more than the pupil needs the teaching will give too much, too fast, to keep from being left alone." And Harry felt the enormous confession in it, the 1,000-year weight of it, and held very still, the way the warden had taught him to hold a broken thing. He learned to take names he had not earned, the library went on. He found a way, there is always a way, for the clever and the impatient to force a name instead of earning it, to break into the meaning instead of growing into it. And a name taken by force does not come gladly. It comes as a wound. and the wound was in him, and it grew, and he grew around it, and by the time I understood what I had let him become, it was too late to untouch it. Harry thought of the black door, with its backward shape. The gentle opening word turned wrong, closed instead of open. "The black door," he said. "That's him. That's where you." "That is where I keep what he made," said the library, "and what he became. I could not destroy it. You cannot destroy a true name, even a stolen one, even a wounded one. So I shut it away, behind the strongest seal I have, the word that closes rather than opens, and I sealed myself, and I slept, and I slept, and I let the world forget me, because I had made something terrible by being too generous with a lonely child, and I did not trust myself, for a very long time, to be trusted with another. And then," it said, and the grief in it turned slowly towards something else. Something that made Harry's throat ache, and then a 4-year-old put his hand on a wall in a cupboard because he wished he were anywhere but there, and I felt him, and he was so like the other one, lonely and gifted and unwanted, that I almost did not open. I almost stayed sealed and let him think he had dreamed it. Do you know why I opened instead?" Harry shook his head, though. "The library could not, or perhaps could, see it. Because you cried," it said. "Not because you were angry. You had every reason to be angry, more reason than he had, and you were not. You were only sad and gentle, and you put your hand on the wall not to break it, but because you were lonely and it was there. And I thought, perhaps this time, perhaps a gentle one, perhaps if I am patient enough patient, as I was not, before I can grow this one right. And so I have gone slowly, Harry, so slowly, slower than you sometimes wished, beginning with the gentlest shape and the slowest discipline, giving you nothing until you had become ready to hold it, because I have made this mistake before, and I could not bear to make it again. Do you understand now why I would not teach you fast? Why I made you fail at the clay 100 times? Why the warden would not mend your bird for you?" "Yes," Harry whispered. He understood. He understood all of it, all at once. 6 years of patience revealed as love and fear braided together, the whole slow shape of his own becoming laid out before him. "You were scared of me turning into him." "Yes." "I won't," said Harry. "I know," said the library. And there was such certainty in it now, such hard-won certainty, that Harry felt it settle over him like a hand on the head. "I know. You earned the name of light tonight, and it came to you gladly, and a name does not come gladly to one who could ever force another. You are not him, Harry. You never were. But I had to be sure. I had to be so very sure. And I am." And there was a long pause, and then, quietly, more quietly than the library had ever said anything, "Thank you for being someone I could be sure of. You will never know what it means to have loved a second time after the first went so wrong, and to have been right to." Harry did not open the black door. He thought about it, of course. He was 10 now and clever, and he had just learned that behind that door was the wreck of the last boy the library had loved, and a wiser and more curious part of him wanted very much to see it, to understand it, to face the thing he had been so carefully grown not to become. But he had learned patience from the best teacher of patience there had ever been, and he understood, without being told, that the black door was not his to open yet. That the library had shown him what lay behind it, not as an invitation but as a trust. The way you tell a child the true and frightening thing because you have decided they are old enough to be trusted with it and not because you want them to act on it. So he let it lie. He carried it, as he carried all the library's sorrows now, gently, without pushing. And he went on learning. He earned the name of water over the next long stretch of months. And it was harder than light because water was deeper and stranger, and the earning of it taught him things about patience and about grief that he would not fully understand for years. The library brought him back to the silver fountain, the one he had played with as a small child, the one that rose up out of its basin and made and unmade itself in shapes of a laughing mouth, a hand, a word. He had thought of it all these years as a toy. Now the library told him it was one of the oldest things in all the halls. Older than the fountain, it looked like. That the silver in it was not water at all, but the very idea of water made visible, kept here so that a pupil learning water's name would have something true to learn from. "Sit with it," the library said, as you sat with the fire. And Harry sat. Water was harder than fire because fire was simple in its heart. It gave itself away and died. And water was not simple at all. Water was patient and water was violent. It bore mountains to sand over ages, and it drowned a village in an afternoon. It was the gentlest thing, cupped in the hands of a healer, and the most terrible, risen up in a wave. Harry sat with the silver fountain for weeks of visits, and could not find the truth of it, because every truth he found had an opposite that was also true, and he grew frustrated in the old way, and the library let him. It was the memory of the blackbird that gave it to him, in the end. He had been sitting with the fountain, watching the silver rise and hang and fall, and he had thought, without meaning to, of the night he had held the dying bird and not pushed at its failing fire, had only kept it company and let it decide to stay. And he saw, all at once, that this was water. That water did not force. That the reason it could wear a mountain to sand and also cradle a healer's hands was that it never insisted, never pushed, only went where it was let, and stayed where it was held, and gave way to everything, and by giving way to everything, and at last did everything. Water was patience made into a substance. Water was the thing the warden had tried to teach him about mending, and the thing the library had spent 6 years being toward him. The strength that does not force, the power that waits, the love that does not push at what wants to go. And the name of water rose in him, deep and cool and endlessly patient. And it was so different from the name of Light, was glad and quick, and giving water was deep and slow, and holding that, Harry understood, holding both names now, that the true names were not just labels. They were the actual truths of things. And that to carry two of them was to carry two whole ways of being in the world. And that this was what the first wizards had been. Not people who knew many spells, but people who had understood many truths so deeply, the truths lived in them and could be called upon. He spoke the name of water softly into the dark of the hall of the deep tongue, and the silver fountain heard its own true name and rose up in answer, rose and rose, higher than it had ever risen for the plain child, and shaped itself for one long moment into the form of the founder. Harry knew it was her, though he had never seen her, knew it as he knew things. Here a tall woman with a warm face, made all of silver light, who looked at Harry across 1,000 years and inclined her head to him, once, the way you solts and would debate me, but it be a soft silver rain that fell back into the basin and was still. Harry sat by the quiet fountain a long time after that, and did not speak, because some things are past speaking, and the library sat with him, and neither of them disturbed the silver. He earned the name of green growing things last, and it was the first great name he used in the daylight world, and it taught him something no wall could. He had not meant to wake the garden. He had gone out one gray morning to weed it, one of Aunt Petunia's endless chores, kneeling in the dead gray earth where nothing had thrived in 10 years, and he had put his hands in the cold soil and felt, as he now felt everything, the sleeping seeds down there, dozens of them, having waited seasons and seasons for a warmth and a welcome that never came. It reminded him so exactly of himself, of the 4-year-old in the cupboard waiting for someone to come, that he said the name of green growing things before he had decided to, softly into the earth, the way you say a kind word to a child who has given up hope. The garden woke. It did not happen all at once, which was its own kind of wonder. It happened over days, so that no one could point to a single moment and cry magic. Green came up where nothing had grown, the dead rose bush by the fence, which Aunt Petunia had left standing, only because pulling it out was more effort than ignoring it. Put out leaves, then buds, then heavy fragrant flowers, more than the poor bush should have been able to hold. The grass thickened. A row of nasturtiums, no one remembered planting, climbed the fence in a riot of orange. And Aunt Petunia, who prized her garden's respectability above nearly everything, found herself with the finest garden in the street and could not explain it, and blamed the neighbor's fertilizer and the mild spring and anything at all except the silent boy who came out each morning before school to stand in the middle of it with his eyes closed, listening to the glad singing of things that had, at last, been called by their true names by someone who loved them. That was when Harry understood that he could not, in the end, keep the two worlds wholly apart. That the gold would leak into the gray no matter how careful he was, because he carried it in him now, and a person who carries such things changes the air around him, the way the rose changed the air around him, the way the rose changed the air around Aunt Petunia's grudging heart. He would have to be careful, always. But careful was not the same as hidden, and he began to understand that spring in the waking garden, that a day was coming when he would not be hidden at all. Now that he could read the old tongue, the library opened its walls to him. This was a gift he had not expected, and it changed his visits. Before, he had gone to particular places, the long corridor, the warden's hall, the fountain to be taught particular things. Now he could simply walk and read, and the walls of the library turned out to be written on nearly everywhere. Once you had the eyes for it, low along the baseboards and high near the ceilings and hidden in the carved patterns he had taken for mere decoration, 1,000 years of the first wizard's knowledge inked and carved and grown into the very stones, waiting. He read the walls the way another child might have wandered a great house reading the spines of every book on every shelf, drunk on the sheer abundance of it, and the library let him, and only now and then said, gently, not that one yet, when he came to something he was not ready for. And Harry, who a lonelier and angrier child would have chafed at every not yet, found that he did not chafe at all, that he had come to trust the library's sense of his readiness more than his own, and that a not yet from someone who had never once lied to him was not a wall but a promise, and he would nod, and move his eyes along and leave the unready thing for the person he would become. Once he passed a stretch of wall that spoke of the extending of a life beyond its span, the art the founder herself had used, and he felt the pull of it, the terrible, reasonable pull of a child who had lost his parents and could not help wondering, and the library said very softly, not that one, Harry, not ever, perhaps, and certainly not yet, and there is a grief in that wall that is not yours to carry. And he took his eyes from it and did not ask. because he had learned that some doors stay shut for love, and that a person is known less by the names they earn than by minds cons with made or wayo. He read the history of the founding, the true version, fuller than the arguing books had given him. He read how the founder had gathered the first wizard's scattered knowledge not in one lifetime, but across 3, extending her own years by arts. Harry was not yet allowed to read, because she could not bear to leave the work unfinished. He read how the library had been built not all at once, but grown, hall by hall, each hall a discipline, each discipline a way of understanding the world, and how the whole vast place was arranged. He began to see, like a person, the reading at the surface, the making and mending deeper in, the true names deeper still, and at the very center, the heart. Something the walls spoke of only in hints, in reverent half-sentences that stopped short, like even the stones grew shy near it. The deepest vault. He had heard the phrase once, years ago, and forgotten it, and now the walls brought it back to him, over and over, always glancingly, always with that shyness. The heart of the library, the first hall, older than all the others from which the rest had grown, the place where the founder had kept the things she valued above every book and every name. The walls did not say what it was. They said only that it was sealed, not against enemies, but against the unready that it would open. When it opened at all, only to one who had learned everything the outer halls could teach, and had earned it, not in the quick way, but in the deep way, and had become, by the learning, the kind of person the founder had built the whole library across 3 lifetimes to find. Harry felt the pull of it. He would not have called it that. He had no word for the quiet gravity that had begun, this year, to lean him toward the deep places of the library. The sense of a room at the center of a familiar house that he had never entered and that had, lately, begun to feel that it was waiting for him. He did not go looking for it. He knew from the walls and from the library's own hints that looking for it was not the way in, that the way in was to keep learning, to keep earning, to keep a-gumming, until one day the last seal recognized what he had become and simply opened, the way the wall in the cupboard had opened to a lonely 4-year-old, because the two of them had known each other. "Is it far?" he asked the library once, standing before a stretch of wall that spoke of the heart in its shy half-sentences. "The deepest vault, is it far from here?" "It is not far in the way you mean," said the library, and Harry heard the care in it. "It is at the center of me. Everything else is arranged around it. In one sense, you have been walking toward it your whole life. In another," and here the almost voice grew very gentle, in another, "you are not ready, and I will not pretend you are, and I will not open it before its time, because I opened things before their time once, and you know what came of that. But you are closer than anyone has been in 1,000 years, Harry. Closer than the last boy ever came, because he wanted it, and wanting is exactly the thing that keeps the last seal shut. You do not want it. You are only becoming ready for it. That is the difference, and it is everything. And it is why one day, you and no one else will stand at its heart." Harry took his hand from the wall. He thought about wanting, and about how the library had spent 6 years teaching him, in 100 quiet ways, that the things most worth having came to those who had stopped grasping for them. The apple to the child who tried to put it back, the name to the one who did not force it, the vault, someday, to the one who did not go looking. He understood that this was not a trick or a cruelty, but simply the deepest law of the place, perhaps the deepest law of magic itself, that the world opens gently to those who have learned to ask gently, and closes against every hand that grabs. "Then I'll wait," he said. "I'm good at waiting." "I know," said the library, and there was love in it, and something that in a person would have been pride. "You are the best at waiting of anyone I have ever taught. It is why I am no longer afraid." He grew. That was the thing the Dursleys could not stop, though they would have if they could. He grew tall for his age, and quiet, and there was a stillness in him now that made even Uncle Vernon, dimly, obscurely, uneasy. A sense that the child in the cupboard had somewhere he went that they could not follow, and were not, if they were honest, entirely sure they wanted to. They stopped, around this time, sending him to the cupboard as punishment. It had stopped seeming like a punishment, and a punishment the punished does not mind is no use to anyone, thinking it a demotion of their attention rather than a promotion. A promotion of his comfort, and Harry, who could now mend anything Dudley had broken and did, quietly, in the nights, found himself with a room full of whole and beautiful things, and a door he could shut, and a window a real window, at last with the real sky in it, with the nut, with the real sty in it, and he lay under that window on his first night in the room, and looked up at the real stars and named them, softly, one by one, the dames to store arbe there dried over the outlet. The window changed him more than he expected. He had never had one. The cupboard had had none, and the second bedroom, when he first got it, had had a mean cramped one that looked out on the fence. but Harry had learned the name of green growing things, and one night, quietly, he had gone out and stood in the strip of dead earth beneath the window and named the seeds sleeping in it, gently, the way you wake a child you love, and by summer there was a climbing rose there that no one had planted, and it had grown up around the window frame so that Harry lay in his narrow bed and looked out through living green at the sky, and it was, he thought, the most beautiful thing he owned, and the Dursleys did not tear it down because Aunt Petunia, the truth she would never know, was that the rose, being called by love, gave off a quiet gladness that reached even her and made the tearing down feel, without her understanding it, like a cruelty she could not quite commit. It was through that window, one warm night near the end of his 10th year, that the owl came. Harry was lying awake, naming stars, when a shape crossed the moon and resolved into a great tawny owl that came down and settled on the sill among the roses and looked at him with round amber eyes. He went still. He knew owls from the Beast Book. He knew they carried things, in the old days, that they were the post of the magic world, that a sky full of owls meant a world of wizards still going about its business, somewhere out beyond the ordinary. This owl carried nothing. It only sat and looked at him, and Harry looked back, and there passed between them a moment of recognition. The owl seemed to know him, or to know what he was, in the way animals had always seemed to know him since the library began its work, and then it hooted, once, softly, almost a question, and lifted off, and was gone into the dark. He told the library about it the next night, and the library was quiet a while. "The world above is beginning to feel you," it said at last. "Not clearly, not yet, but you have earned 2 of the great names, and named a garden alive, and such things send ripples, the way a stone sends ripples even in a pond no one is watching. There are those out there, schools and old families and older powers who keep watch for magic waking in a child. They will have watched for you before, when you were small, and found only the ordinary sad flickers of an untaught gift and looked away." And here, the almost voice grew careful. "They will look again, one day soon. You are near the age when they come. And when they come, Harry, everything will change. The gray world and the gold one both, and I cannot tell you how, because I have slept through the making of that world and do not know its shape. But I can tell you this, whatever they offer you, whatever they name you, you will carry what these halls have given you, and no school and no family and no power out there will ever have taught anyone the way you have been taught. Slowly, gently, from the root. Remember that when the world above finally opens its door to you the way I open mine. You were taught by the first teacher there ever was. You have nothing to prove to anyone." Harry lay in his room at night, under the rose and the real stars, and thought about the owl, and the world out there full of owls and schools and old families, and he found that he was not afraid of it, and not quite eager for it either. He was 10. He had a window, and a garden he had woken, and a name for the light, and a name for the white, and a name for the water, and a friend older than the world who loved him. The rest could come when it came. He was good at waiting. There was more, of course. There was the black door still shut. There was the deepest vault, which the library had mentioned only once, in passing, years ago, and never since, and which Harry had begun, lately, to feel the way you feel a room you have not entered in a large and familiar housepole, a curiosity, a sense of something waiting. There was the wide world above, which did not yet know that James and Lily Potter's son could speak the true names of light and water and green growing things, and which would one day have questions. But that was all still to come. For now there was a boy of 10 with a window and a room and a name for the light, and a library that loved him and had learned at terrible cost how to love him well, and between them and the gold and the dark, they had time. They had always had time. It was the first thing the library had ever promised him, and the truest, and it had never once broken it. Chapter 4. End Chapter 4. End Chapter 5. The Heart of the Library. The first letter came on a Tuesday, addressed in green ink to Mr. H. Potter, the second bedroom, 4 Privet Drive, and Uncle Vernon burned it in the grate before Harry could do more than glimpse his own name written by a hand that knew exactly where he slept. Harry, who was 3 weeks from 11, said nothing. He had known this was coming. The library had told him it would, that he was near the age when the world above came for children like him. He watched the green ink curl and blacken in the fire and felt the old dread reach for him out of habit, and then felt it fall away, because he was not the child who had once had nothing. Let them burn it. He knew a name for fire now. He could have called the letter whole out of the flames with a word, and did not, because there was no need, because more would come, and because he had learned above all things not to grasp. More came. That was the way of it, apparently. The library had been right about ripples. By the end of the week, there were letters coming down the chimney and under the doors and through the cracks around the windows. Dozens of them, 100, green ink and yellowed parchment filling the house like a snowfall, and Uncle Vernon boarding up the letterbox, and Dudley shrieking, and Aunt Petunia's face gone the color of old paper, and Harry standing quiet in the middle of it, catching one out of the air as it fell, holding it, his own name in that certain green hand, a school he had read about on the library's walls without ever quite believing it was still out there, running out. One evening with the house came apart over those letters in its small way, and Harry watched it with a calm that unnerved the Dursleys more than any outburst could have. Uncle Vernon, red and sweating, nailed boards over the letterbox and then over the gaps around the front door, and still the letters came down the chimney in a rush of soot, folded inside the morning eggs somehow, rolled up inside the 24 bottles of milk on the step. Dudley took to opening doors with a stick held at arm's length. Aunt Petunia developed a twitch at the corner of one eye and scrubbed the same clean counter for an hour at a stretch. And through all of it, Harry moved quietly, doing his chores, saying nothing. And only he knew that the storm of parchment was not an assault but an invitation, that somewhere out beyond the boarded windows a whole world had noticed him at last and was knocking, politely at first, and then less politely, on a door the Dursleys were trying to hold shut against the future itself. By Sunday, Uncle Vernon had the look of a man who has decided to flee. He gathered them all into the car with a wild light in his eye, muttering about going somewhere the letters couldn't follow, and Harry, in the back seat with Dudley's elbow in his ribs, understood that it would not work, that you cannot outrun a world that has decided to find you, and understood too that his own real journey would not be made in this car at all, but through a wall. That night, downward. He did not open the letter he had caught. He went, when the boarding house they fled to had gone dark, and Dudley's snores filled the little room. Down through the wall it opened for him anywhere now. Any wall, any dark. The library had long since stopped needing the particular plaster of the cupboard, because the door had never really been in the wall at all. It had been in him into the gold, to tell the only one he trusted with the shape of his own future. "They've come," he said, sitting on the worn bench beneath the tree, the letter still in his hand. "The world above. A school. There's a school, and they want me, and I think..." He stopped. He turned the letter over. "I think I might have to leave. Not you, not for good, but up there. Out there. I might have to go and be a wizard where people can see." The library was quiet, and the quiet had a shape. Harry knew. The shape of something long expected finally arriving. "I have been waiting for this night," it said, "since the night you were 4 and cried against my wall. Not dreading it. Waiting for it. Because it means I did the thing right. This time. A teacher who keeps a pupil forever has failed, Harry. The whole purpose of everything I am is to make someone strong enough to leave, and to leave carrying what I gave, out into a world that needs it. You are ready to go." And there was no grief in it. Or if there was, the grief was folded up small beneath a thing much larger, a thing Harry could only call gladness. "But before you go," it said, "there is one thing left, the last thing. The thing everything else was for. It is time, Harry. It is time I opened the heart." The way to the deepest vault did not fold short. Harry had grown used to the library folding its halls together for him, bringing distant places a step away when something mattered. It did not do that now. Instead, the library said, "Walk. All the way. It is the last lesson, and it cannot be shortened, because the walking is part of it. Go down, and keep going down, and do not stop, and you will come to it. I will be with you the whole way." And Harry understood that this too was deliberate. That the founder who had made power impossible to hold until you were ready, had made the heart impossible to reach except by the long way, on foot, through everything. So he walked. He walked out of the first hall, past the tree of books that had fed him apples when he was 4, and it turned its pages to him as he passed. A rustling farewell. He walked down the long corridor, and the books called his name. Softly now, not shouting. "Harry, Harry," and the deaf grandfather Bokai up said, "Where's he off to?" And was told in a hush, "The heart, grandfather. He's going to the heart." And the whole corridor went reverently silent. Hundreds of voices that had waited 1,000 years for a reader falling still to watch that reader walk toward the center of everything. He walked past the little green beast book, which let out a single bow truckle to ride on his shoulder away for company, before it climbed down and skittered back home. He walked past the Starbucks alcove, and the soft, cool voice said only, "Well earned," and let him pass. Deeper still, the way led him through the hall of the deep tongue, and here he slowed because he could not do otherwise. The vast dark hung all around him, crowded with the true names of the world, and they knew him now, everyone. And as he passed they brightened, a slow wave of pale light rolling with him through the dark, the name of light and the name of water blazing brightest, because they were his, earned and glad, but all the others answering too, the name of fire and the name of grain things and 1,000 more he had not yet earned, and the name of his way to the heart like torches held up along a road. The music of it swelled around him as he walked. The chord of every true thing being truly itself, and Harry understood that he was hearing it, perhaps, for the last time in this form. That whatever the library became inside him after tonight, the actual hanging names in the actual dark he might not walk among again, and he let himself feel that, all the way down, the way the warden had taught him and did not push it away, and carried it, and kept walking. He came, deeper down, to the round hall of healed things, and he had not known the way would take him through it, and he stopped, because the warden was awake. The great winged lion lay on its raised floor, gold eyes open, watching him come, and around the walls the mended things glowed. The gold-seamed cup, the silver-jointed sword, the little scarred horse, all of them brighter than he had ever seen them, like they knew. "So," said the warden, in its voice that came up through the floor, "the heart. I wondered if I would live to see a pupil walk to the heart. I have not, in all my ages, the last one who might have. It did not finish. It never finished that sentence, and Harry, who knew now who the last one was and what lay behind the black door, understood the grief in it fully for the first time. "Come here," said the warden. "Before you go on, there is a thing I must tell you, and it is the reason I was made, and I have waited your whole life to say it to someone who could do something with it." Harry crossed the hall and stood before the great gold face. "The heart cannot be opened while I keep a wound," said the warden. "You know the wound. The black door. What the last one made, and what he became. Sealed away because it could not be destroyed. The founder built me to guard the mending of things, and I have guarded it well. But there is one broken thing in all these halls that I have never been able to mend because it is past my art, because it is a break in a person and not in a cup. And you know, Harry, I taught you myself that a living break, a break in a fire, is the one thing mending cannot touch." The gold eyes held his. "But you learned something in this hall that even I did not teach you. The night of the bird. Do you remember what you did?" "I held it," Harry said slowly. "I couldn't mend the fire, so I stayed with it, so it wouldn't be alone." "Yes," said the warden. And something in the great voice trembled. "You cannot mend what is behind that door. No one can. It is past all asking. But you might be able to do the other thing. The thing you did for the bird. You might be able to go to it and stay with it and let it not be alone. It has been alone 1,000 years, Harry. The last one. What is left of him? Angry and wounded and shut in the dark, alone with the thing he made of himself, and no one has been able to go to him, because to go to him you must not be afraid of him, and you must not want anything from him, and you must be able to hold a thing that is going without pushing it to stay, and there has never, in 1,000 years, been anyone who could do all three, until, perhaps, now." Harry looked toward the deep of the hall, toward where he knew, somewhere ahead, the black door waited with its backward shape. "The heart won't open," he said, understanding, "until I do that. The heart will not open," said the warden, "until the wound is at peace. That is not a lock the founder built to keep you out, Harry. It is a mercy she built to keep anyone from reaching the most precious thing in these halls, while the most broken thing still suffered untended. She could not bear it. She built the library so that nothing true would ever be lost, and the last one was true once. A true and gifted and lonely child, and losing him to the dark was the great grief of this whole place, and she would not let the heart be reached over his forgotten head. Go to him, not to win the heart, never for that. Go because he has been alone 1,000 years and you know exactly what that is." And then the warden's gold eyes softened. "Then the door at the center will open on its own, because you will have become, at last, entirely the person she was waiting for." The black door was smaller than Harry remembered. He had last stood before it at 5, and it had loomed. Now, at nearly 11, taller, taut, carrying the names of light and water and the whole slow discipline of 6 years, he stood before it, and it came only to his shoulder, low and old, its black wood banded with bruise-colored iron, the backward shape carved into its center. The gentle opening word turned wrong, closed instead of open, the sleeping snake with its head swallowing its tail. Cold came off it, as it always had. But Harry was not afraid, and he examined the fear's absence the way the warden had taught him to examine everything, and found it true. He was not afraid, because he did not want anything from the door, and fear, he had learned, is mostly the fear of losing something you are clutching, and he was clutching nothing. He had come to give, not to get. "I cannot go with you past this door," said the library, and for the first time in 7 years there was something in the almost voice that was almost frightened. "It is the one place in me I sealed away so completely that even I do not go there. When you cross, you will be alone with him. More alone than you have ever been, and I will not be able to reach you. And Harry, there is a chance you will not be able to reach him either. He may be too far gone. 1,000 years is a long time to be alone in the dark with your own worst self. If it is too much, if there is nothing left to reach, you must come back. Promise me you will come back. I have lost 1 child to that dark. I will not lose 2. I'll come back," Harry said. "I promise." And then, because he had learned from the library itself how much a true word given in love could hold, he said it in the old tongue, the deep one, so that the promise was not just a sound but a true thing, and the library heard it and was, a little, comforted. He put his hand flat on the black door, over the backward shape. He did not try to force it. He did not speak the closing word. It was not his, and he would not wear another's wound, even to open a door. Instead, he did the thing he had been doing since he was 4, the very first thing, the thing that had opened the wall in the cupboard he wished. Not himself away and not himself in, but the wish he had learned was truest of all, the wish to be with the one on the other side who was alone, and the backward shape under his palm shuddered, and the cold deepened, and then reluctantly, the way a fist opens when the hand inside it is finally too tired to clench any longer, The black door swung inward, and the dark behind it was absolute, and Harry stepped through into it, and the door closed behind him, and he was alone. It was not like the Starbucks dark, which was full of light. It was not like the Deep Tongues dark, which was full of names. This dark was empty and cold, and it pressed on him from every side, and there was no gold in it anywhere. No warm feeling, no library at his shoulder, nothing but Harry and the enormous silence of a place that had been sealed 1,000 years. "Hello?" he said, and his voice fell flat and dead, the way it had fallen in the cupboard. The way it had never once fallen in the gold. Nothing answered. He waited. He was good at waiting. He stood in the absolute dark and did not call his light, though he could have, though every part of him wanted the comfort of it, because he understood that to come here blazing with a name earned gladly would be to shame the one who had never earned any name gladly in his life. And he had not come to shame. He had come to keep company. So he stood in the dark as the one who lived here stood in it, unlit, and he waited, and after a long time, minutes or hours. Time did not run here at all. Something in the dark stirred. "Go away," said a voice. It was a boy's voice. That was the thing that undid Harry, that steadied him and broke his heart at once. It was a boy's voice, no older than his own, thin and cold and cracked with 1,000 years of disuse, and it came out of the dark from very close by, from someone sitting, Harry thought, on the ground. The way Harry had sat on the ground of the cupboard. "I'm not going to hurt you," Harry said. A sound came out of the dark that might have been a laugh if a laugh could be made of only its bitterness. "Hurt me? You. She sent you, didn't she? To finish it. To unmake me at last. Now she's found a new one." The voice cracked further. "You're the new one. I can feel it. All lit up inside, all gold, all loved. She grew you right, didn't she? She grew me wrong, and she grew you right, and now you come to put me out like a bad lamp." "No," said Harry. "I came to sit with you." Silence. Harry sat down. He lowered himself to the cold ground in the absolute dark, cross-legged as he had sat on the floor of 100 halls, and he settled, and he did not reach for the other, and he did not speak, and he did not want anything, and he simply stayed. It was the hardest magic he had ever done, and it did not look like magic at all. It looked like a boy sitting quietly in the dark beside another boy. "What are you doing?" said the voice after a while, and the bitterness in it had cracked, just slightly, around a thread of something else. "Sitting with you." "Why?" Harry thought about how to answer. He thought about lying, saying something comforting, and discarded it, because the library had taught him that softening a true thing was a way of lying, and the warden had taught him that you could not mend what you would not understand truly. So he told the truth. "Because I know what it's like," he said, into the dark. "To be shut somewhere small and cold and alone, and to think no one's ever coming. I lived in a cupboard. Before all this. Before her. I used to sit in the dark just like this and wait for someone to come, and no one ever did, not once, for 4 years, and I know—" His voice caught, and he let it, and went on. "I know exactly how it feels, and I couldn't stand it. That you've been in here 1,000 years feeling that, and everyone was too scared to come. So I came. That's all. I'm not going to fix you or fight you or put you out. I'm just not going to let you be alone anymore. If you want me to go, I'll go. But I'd rather stay." The dark was silent for a very long time, and then the one in the dark began, quietly, terribly, to cry the dry, disbelieving crying of someone who had forgotten they could, who had been angry so long they had lost the thing underneath the anger, which was only ever grief, which was only ever a lonely child who had wanted to be loved and had reached for it the wrong way, because no one taught him the right one, and Harry did not touch him, and did not shush him, and did not tell him to stop. He only stayed in the dark, as he had stayed with the bird, warm company kept beside a failing fire, and let the 1,000 years of it come out. When the worst of it had passed, the one in the dark began, haltingly, to talk, the way people do when someone has finally sat down beside them. And Harry listened, because listening was half of all magic, and he had learned it from a river. He had been an orphan too, the one in the dark. That was the first thing, and it went through Harry like cold water. Orphaned young and passed hand to hand among people who did not want him. And he had found the library the way Harry had found it, lonely and gifted and wanting to know, except that the world had used him harder than it had used even Harry, and he had come into the gold already full of a rage that Harry had been spared, mostly by nothing more than luck and a kinder temper. "She loved me," said the one in the dark, and there was no bitterness left in it now, only a terrible, wondering sorrow. "I know she did. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel anything except how much I wanted to be strong enough that no one could ever put me anywhere small and cold again. And she went slow, and I couldn't bear slow. Slow felt like another way of them keeping things from me, and I found how to take the names without earning them, and it felt—" The voice cracked. "It felt like winning. For about a day, and then it started to hurt, and it never stopped, and by the time I understood what I'd done to myself, it was too far gone, and she shut me in here, and she was right to. And I've been so angry at her for 1,000 years, and it was never her, it was never her, it was never her, it was only that I couldn't wait. I couldn't just wait." "I know," said Harry, softly. I know how it feels to want to be strong so no one can put you anywhere small again." He was quiet a moment. "I wanted that too, every day at first. The only difference is she got to you before anyone taught you it was safe to want anything else, and she got to me a little sooner. That's all. That's the only difference between us. It isn't fair that a little sooner is the whole difference, but it is." The boy in the dark was silent for a long time. "You're not gloating," he said at last, wonderingly. "You could gloat, you won. You're the one she grew right." "There's nothing to win," said Harry. "You're not the thing I beat. You're the kid who didn't get sat with in time. I'm just sitting with you now. Late. Too late, maybe, but I'd rather late than not at all." And the one in the dark made a sound that was, impossibly, almost a laugh. A real one this time. Small and cracked and free of the bitterness, and he said, "She'd have liked you. She used to say the strongest thing in the world was the one nobody thinks is strong. Waiting. Being gentle. Not grabbing." He drew a breath that shook. "I never believed her. I think I believe her now." He could not mend the one in the dark. The warden had been right. It was past all asking, past all art, a break too old and too deep in a fire nearly out. But he found, as he sat there, that there was one thing left he could do. And it was the last and gentlest thing he had learned, and he had not known he was going to do it until he did. The boy in the dark had a name he had taken by force long ago, the stolen name that had wounded him, that had grown in him and that he had grown around, and it was still in him, a splinter of the deep tongue lodged crosswise in his soul, and it was the source of all his pain, the wound that would not close, because a name taken by force comes as a wound and never stops being one. Harry could feel it there, in the dark, as he could feel a break in a cup. He could not pull it out. Pulling would only tear. But he could do for it what he had learned to do for broken things. He could ask. He reached not with his hands, but with the thing the deep tongue had woken in him, and he found the wounded, stolen, wrongly taken name where it lay crosswise in the dark, and he did not command it, and he did not force it, and he did not want it. He only asked it, gently, in the old tongue, the way you ask the pieces of a cup how they wish to be whole, not to be his, not to be pulled out, not even to be healed, but only to be healed, but only to be at peace. To stop hurting, to lie down at last, to be, after 1,000 years of being held wrong, finally set down. And a name, even a stolen one, even a wounded one, will answer a true asking. If the asking wants nothing for itself, the splinter in the dark loosened. Harry felt it go, felt the crosswise thing turn slowly straight, felt the wound that had never closed begin, at long last, gently to close, not mended, not made like it had never been, but eased, laid down, at peace. The way the warden had taught him some things could only be eased and carried and never truly fixed. And as it eased, the one in the dark grew quiet, and the terrible 1,000-year cold began, very slowly, to warm, and Harry understood that he was not saving him, because there was nothing left to save. The fire was nearly out and had been for 1,000 years and could not be relit. He was only doing the other thing, the thing for the bird, the thing that could not be finished, but could be given. He was making it so that the going, when it came, would not be in pain. "It's quiet," said the one in the dark, wonderingly, and his voice was almost a child's now, almost only a child's, the anger gone out of it with the splinter. "It stopped hurting." "It's never stopped hurting." "I know," said Harry. "Are you going to stay until—" The voice could not finish it. "Until," Harry agreed. "Yes, I'll stay until." And he did. He sat in the warming dark with the last one, the child the library had loved and lost and grieved 1,000 years, and he stayed, keeping company with a fire going gently out, and it was the saddest thing he had ever done, and it was. He understood even as he did it, the truest and the finest, the whole of everything the dark, that it looked at sight itemite. When at last the fire went out gently, without pain, the way the warden had said the ones that could not be saved should be helped to go, Harry felt the dark change. Felt the enormous ancient wound of the library close over at last. Felt the sealed place that had been a scream for 1,000 years become, finally, only a quiet grave. Tended, no longer alone, he sat a while longer. Then he stood in the dark and he said, softly, to the piece where he had been, "Goodbye. I'm sorry no one came sooner. I'm sorry it was so long." And he turned, and behind him the black door stood open, gold light spilling through it, and he walked back out into the warmth, and the library was there, waiting, and the almost voice was thick past speaking, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Because there are things that are past all saying, and this was the deepest of them. The heart opened on its own. Harry felt it happen while he stood in the mended dark with the library's grief and gladness braided around him, felt, somewhere below and ahead, a vast and ancient seal that had held 1,000 years simply let go, the way a held breath lets go, and a warmth come up from the deepest place of all, older and softer than any gold he had known. The library said very quietly, "It is open." She kept it shut over his suffering, and you have eased his suffering, and so it is opened, and I did not do it, and you did not do it. It has done it itself, because it knows what you have become. Come, the last few steps are yours alone, but I will walk them beside you all the same. and they went down, the last way, together. The heart of the library was not large. That was the first surprise. After all the vastness, the great halls, the corridors that ran for miles, the domed room of the warden, the endless dark of the deep tongue. The heart was small. It was round and low and warm, and it was lit not with gold, but with a soft, steady light that seemed to come from the walls themselves, and it was. Harry realized with a strange ache, a room built to the scale of a person, of an ordinary person, of a woman who had wanted, at the center of the greatest work of magic ever made, a place that felt like home. There was a hearth, unlit, and 2 chairs before it, worn, comfortable, the chairs of someone who had sat here and read of an evening. There was a small table with a cup on it, a plain cup, and Harry looked and saw a thin line of gold down its side where it had once been broken and mended, and understood that this was her own cup, the Founder's. That she had sat here in her own heart and drunk from a mended cup because she believed a broken thing made whole was more beautiful than a thing that had never broken thing. And there were books, only a few, a single shelf of them, the ones she had loved best out of all the thousands, kept close, kept here in the heart. And on the wall above the hearth there was writing in the old tongue, in a hand Harry somehow knew was hers, and he read it. And it was not a spell or a prayer or an instruction. It was a letter. To him, to whoever came. If you are reading this, it said, then you have walked the whole of my library and learned its disciplines and earned its names, and here the hand grew unsteady, like written through tears, and you have done the thing I could not do, and eased the suffering of the one I lost. And if you have done that, then you are the one I built all of this to find, across 3 lifetimes against 1,000 years, and I am sorry I am not here to meet you, and I am sorry I am not here to meet you, and I am so, everything here is yours now. But that is not why I built the heart. I built the heart to keep the one thing I could not bear to lose, the one thing worth more than every book and every name, and I leave it to you, because you, above all, will understand its worth. It is on the table. Take it up. It is the last gift, and the first, and the only one that ever really mattered. Harry read the letter twice, and then a third time, and he went and stood before the single shelf of the Founder's own best-loved books, and he looked at their spines, and they were not grand books, not the great tomes of names and disciplines from the deeper halls. They were small, worn, ordinary, a book of a country's old songs, a book about the keeping of bees. A children's book of beast tales, the ancestor, he thought, of the green book that had taught him to read. He understood, looking at them, something about the woman who had built the greatest library in the world, that at the very center of it, in the one room she made for herself, she had kept not power, but pleasure, not the mightiest magic, but the things that had made her glad, and that this was perhaps the wisest thing in all the halls, wiser than any name that a person, who forgets to keep near them the glad, ordinary things becomes, in the end, the one in the dark, all strength and no warmth, and puts themselves at a bad lamp. He touched the spine of the beast tales gently, as he touched everything now, and it was warm and it seemed to lean toward his hand the way the books in the corridor leaned, and he made a promise to himself that whatever the world above became, however grand or dangerous or loud, he would always keep near him some glad, ordinary thing, a song, a garden, a friend, and never let himself forget that these and not the names were the heart. Then he turned to the table. There was no jewel on it, no wand, no crown, no weapon. There was a bowl, a wide, shallow bowl of pale stone, and it was full of light, not sleeping light, like the jars, but moving light, silver and gold together, turning slowly, and Harry looked into it and understood, with the deep wordless knowing of the halls, what it was. It was memory. It was the Founder's last and greatest discipline, the one the walls had been too shy to name, the art she had valued above all others because she had lost a child and could not bear that anyone true should ever be wholly lost again. The keeping of memory, the holding of what love could not otherwise hold. And the library said gently, she left it for you to learn. But it has been waiting so long, and it has learned to give as well as keep. And I think, Harry, I think there is something in it for you, something it has held for you since before you were born, waiting for you to be ready to see it. Look, if you want to, you need not. But it has been waiting, and so I think, have you? Harry knew what it meant. He had known, perhaps, since he was 4, since the dream beneath the tree, since the picture of the woman with dark red hair whose face he could not see, and whose facelessness had made his chest hurt. He stood over the bowl of turning light with his heart going, and he reached out, and he touched the surface of the memory as he had once touched the picture of the apple, and the light rose up to meet him. He saw his mother's face, not a picture of it, not a dream of it. Her face, truly, clearly, at last, the dark red hair, the green eyes that were his own eyes, looking down at him, and she was young, and she was laughing, and she was holding him, a baby, small enough to fit along her 2 arms, and she was saying something. And the memory gave him the sound of it, gave him her voice, which he had never heard, which he had grieved without knowing its shape, and she was saying, "There he is." And he did not try to hold it, and he let it be what it was, which was a gift, and the greatest one. The memory did not hurry. It gave him the whole of the moment, the way the starbook gave whole skies. He saw his mother carry him to a window. There had been a window with ordinary evening light coming through it and hold him up to see the garden and name things for him, the way Harry would one day name things in a dead Surrey garden and wake it. That's a rose, Harry, and that's the moon. See the moon, see the moon, see the moon. Fairy the baby had reached one fat hand toward the moon the way Harry himself had once reached for the moon. Painted on a bake, div kind, lil kaboon have the mooth. I wouldn't put anything past that one. And there had been such warmth in it, such ordinary certain love. A mother and a father who looked at their small son and saw, folded up inside him, all the years they thought were coming, the way the library had seen them, the way everyone who had ever truly loved him had seen them, the way everyone who had ever truly loved him had seen them. They had not known, they could not have known how little time, but they had given him the thing that mattered in the time they had, freely, without counting it, and it had waited for him in a bowl of light in the heart of the world for 11 years, and now it was his, and no cupboard and no thin white mouth and no large hand had ever been able to take it, because it had been safe all along, kept where no cruelty could reach, waiting only for him to be ready to hold it. When it faded, he was crying, and the library let him, and did not shush him, and stayed with him, as he had learned from it to stay with anyone who wept. And after a while the crying eased into something quieter, something that was not grief and not joy but had room in it for both, the way the mending seams had room for both the break and the wholeness. That's why she kept it, Harry said at last, wonderingly, looking at the bowl of light, the most precious thing, not power, not names, memory. So no one who was loved would ever be wholly lost, so a kid who never got to know, could know. Anyway, he wiped his face. That's the most precious thing. Yes, said the library, and it was the only word it had, and it was enough. He did not stay in the heart. It was not a place to stay, it was a place to have reached, and having reached it, he understood, was the whole of the point. He took the founder's letter and he took the memory of his parents folded into himself where no one could ever burn it or count it or take it away, and he left the bowl on the table for whoever might come after him in some further age, because that was what the founder had done, and it was right. Before he left the heart, though, he did one thing the founder had not asked of him, and it came to him the way the truest things always came, unbidden, from the place where the warm feeling lived. He knelt at the little table, and he took up the pen that lay beside the founder's cup, a plain pen, worn smooth by a hand 1,000 years gone, and on a blank leaf from one of her own beloved books. Gently borrowed, he wrote a letter of his own, not in the old tongue. He wrote it in plain words, the words a frightened child could read, because he was thinking of a particular kind of reader. If you are reading this, he wrote, then you found the door the way I did, and you were lonely the way I was, and you got all the way down here, which means you are gentle, because only the gentle get this far. I want you to know 3 things. The first is that you are not a mistake. Someone told me that once when I was 4, and it took me years to believe it, and it was true, and it is true about you. The second is that the waiting is the magic. I know it doesn't feel like it. It feels like the opposite of magic, but it is the whole of it. The third is that you are not alone, and you never were, even in the cupboard, even in the dark, because the one who taught me is in these walls, and now, if you've come this far, in you, and it loves you already, the way it loved me before I could read. Hederi taste it, in fur white. And furter means wind, because titles were the world above's business, and not the heart's. And he set it in the bowl of light beside the founder's letter, and the memory light rose and took it in, and kept it, and would give it one day, in some further age, to another lonely gifted child, who had walked all the way down. And Harry would never know their name. And it did not matter because he understood cried. He swelled trailed, waged trench child sritis time to remember shit. But there was one thing left to settle, and it was the thing he had come down to say in the first place, before the heart, before the black door, before any of it, that he had to go. Up. Out. Into the world above with its owls and its green ink and its school, into the life that was waiting to teach him 100 lesser magics in 100 lesser ways, and that going meant leaving the gold behind, leaving the tree and the corridor and the warden and the fountain and the friend older than the world, and Harry stood in the warm heart of the library and found that he could not bear it, that this one loss was the one he did not know how to carry. I don't want to leave you, he said. You're the only. He stopped. You saved me. Before I could even read. You're my. He could not finish that one either. I know, said the library. And here is the last thing, Harry, and the founder knew it too, which is why the memory is what it is. Nothing that is truly loved is ever wholly lost. You are not leaving me. You cannot. And it told him, then, the last secret, the one it had saved, that a library is not a place, that it never had been, that the halls and the gold and the shelves were only the shape it wore, and that its truth the voice, the patience, the love, the whole of what had taught him could go where he went, because he carried it now, all of it, in the place where the warm feeling lived, in the light it had folded into his hand when he was 4 and had never taken back. You'd been carrying me since you were small, it said. Every name you earned, everything you mended, every wall you read you. We're not borrowing them from me. You are becoming me. The library the founder built to keep knowledge from ever being lost has, at last, done the truest version of the thing it was built for. It has put itself somewhere no fire can burn, and no seal can hold, and no 1,000 years can bury. It has put itself in a person, in you. Go up, Harry. Go and be a wizard where people can see. And every time you speak a true name, or mend a broken thing, or refuse to grasp at a thing you have not earned, or sit down in the dark beside someone alone, I will be there, because that is where I've always been. You will never once be without me. That is what it means, that you were loved. That is the whole of what I had to teach you. Harry stood a long time in the heart of the library, and then he did the thing he had done at 4 and at 7, and every time it mattered, he put his hand flat against the warm wall, over the founder's handwritten letter, over the whole vast, patient, loving weight of the place, and he said, "Thank you." And the light of the heart brightened. Only a little, only the vase brightens, and Harry turned, and walked back. He walked up through all of it one last time as himself was leaving, and it was not sad, or not only sad, because the library had told him the truth and he believed it, that he carried it now, that he was not saying goodbye to a place, but growing out of a shape he had outgrown. The way a seed is not sad to become a tree. The warden was waiting, awake, its gold eyes warm. "You did it," it said. "You went into the dark and you eased what I could not mend in 1,000 years. There has never been a pupil like you in this hall, and there will never be another, and I am glad past my old stone bones that I stayed awake to see it. Go well, Mender. Remember the discipline above all the rest. The world will teach you to break. You will know better." And Harry laid his hand on the great gold brow one last time, and the warden let him, and something passed between them that needed no words, and then Harry went on. The long corridor was awake and loud with love as he passed, 1,000 books calling his name. Not sadly, gladly, come back, read us again, and the deaf grandfather book bellowing, good lad, from up near the ceiling, and the little green beast book letting out every creature it held at once. Bow truckles and nifflers and billywigs and the tiny fire crab, a whole riot of wonders streaming down the corridor to see him off, and Harry laughed wet-eyed and laughing through a storm of impossible creatures that had waited 1,000, and had bowered out. He came at last to the first hall, and the tree of books, and the crack in the wall that had been for 7 years the door between his two worlds. He stood before it. On the other side was the second bedroom, and the boarded letterbox, and the Dursleys, and tomorrow, and the owls, and the green ink, and the whole loud waiting world above that did not yet know what the quiet boy in the round glasses carried folded up inside him. He was not afraid of it. He had a name for the light. He had a name for the water. He had the discipline of mending, and the courtesy owed to a river, and the names of the winds, and the whole first language of the world, and the memory of his mother's face and his father's laugh, and a library older than England, living in the place where the warm feeling lived, and he was 11 years old, and he was, though the Dursleys would never know it, above was about to find out, quietly, unmistakably, the most extraordinary child alive. He put his hand on the wall. He did not wish himself away this time, and he did not wish himself in. He wished himself forward. He wished himself out and up and on, into the life that was waiting. The wall drew back like frost from a warm breath. The gold light narrowed behind him and did not go out, because it was in him now and would never go out again, and Harry Potter crawled through the crack in the wall one last time, into the ordinary world, carrying the oldest magic there had ever been, and stood up in his own small room under the rose he had woken and the real stars he could name, and turned his face toward the morning, and everything was about to begin. Chapter 5 End.